That one was massive. Let's hear that one again. Check. Let's go. What's up? What up, y'all? Big shouts out to my homeboy out there. That's our intro music. ROOXG. Go to ROOXG YouTube. There's some homeboy bringing in some nice jungle for us tonight. What's up, y'all? How you doing? It feels like it's been a long time, but it's been a week, I guess. Well, it hadn't been that long. If you caught me on TNT Radio Live with Hesher, that was yesterday. Yesterday, I was also on with Arthur Clark and Ruckus on TNT last week on the late night show, and then I was on Hesher last Thursday. So big shouts out to Hesher out there and the Boiler Room crew. Love them. They are good friends, and people who know they've been around for a long time. We've been watching them for a long time, so it was awesome to be on there. You know, what a privilege. So that was very, very kind. Hesher was very, very sweet, very kind for asking me to be on there and talk about literature. And we talked a little bit about Arthur Clark, Joseph Arthur. We talked about Northern Ireland and what's been going on in Northern Ireland over the past month. So shouts out to TNT Radio Live. And so shout out to everybody out there. Tonight we're covering post-apocalyptic literature and film. I thought this would be a good topic. I was sort of organized. I don't know if I organized. I'm not very organized, but I tried to manage this one by theme because shout out to our homeboy Ben Dubs, Benjamin dropping big Benjamins. He sponsored a stream on Canicle for Liebowitz. So this is a book by Walter Miller Jr. And Walter Miller Jr. is an American author who was in World War II and was involved in the bombing of Monte Cassino during the big Dubs Part 2, Dubs Part 2, during World War II. And he wrote this one novel during his lifetime. Shouts out to Goose out there who says, "Are you Irish, Henley?" I'm 100% Anglo, 100% Anglo. But of course, you know that I lived in Northern Ireland. I got my bachelor's degree at Queen's University Belfast, and I got my master's degree there. And I lived in England for 2 years. So, yes, part Ulsterman. Shouts out to Crispy out there in the old country. So tonight we're covering the Canicle for Liebowitz, which is the book by Walter Miller Jr. Sort of a post-apocalyptic triptych. Interesting book. We're also going to talk about the excellent film, The Book of Eli. If you guys haven't seen that, I'm sure I don't know if you've seen it or not. I know my homeboy Jethro out there has seen it. And one more shout out here. Big shouts out to my homeboy Jethro out there, who's the greatest mod on the internet, my best friend. Coming up, just some news before we get started here. Coming up in 2 weeks, we got a big stream with our homeboy JD. Jay is coming on, or we're gonna discuss. We're gonna analyze the excellent revelatory movie Network, and that was Jethro's idea. It's been boiling for a long time. It's been in the boiler room for a long time. So shouts out to Jethro out there because that was his idea. And so Jay and I are going to cover that. That's going to be fun. Also, one more shameless plug before we get started. I will be on with our homeboy, David Patrick Carey, Church of the Eternal Logos. We're going to continue our film stream. Shouts out to DPH out there, my good friend. And we're going to cover Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark tomorrow night on his channel, Church of the Eternal Logos. Everybody here I know is over there. A lot of y'all came from over there. So, of course, you know about Church of the Eternal Logos. So we'll be over there tomorrow night, and that'll be fun. That'll be another fun stream. Please, one last thing. I promise, one last thing. Please hit that like, share. Please hit the sub button if you haven't subbed, because we're getting close. We're getting very close to our 2K. And maybe we'll have some kind of party stream. Drop some ideas for a 2K party stream. We'll probably hit 2K and 100,000 views. It's taken a year to get up there, but we got there. 100,000 views. So we'll probably get there about the same time. So we'll have a big party stream. Shouts out to Toledo out there. So please share the stream. And if you would, look on those links that Jethro just dropped. And please think about supporting me. You can support me directly with those 3 links in the video description and channel description. Those are the best way to get to me. And I mean, we're all grown-ups here. I need money. I really do. I need it. I mean, I'm running out of books. I mean, look, this is yes. Somebody I saw, people get mad about people who have bookcases behind them. It's not some fucking set or some shit. Excuse my language, folks. This is my living room. This isn't even my library. I'm just in the living room with the bookcases because it's a brighter room, and I got nice bright white bookcases here. The library is a little darker. If you watched the channel earlier on when we first started, I was in the library, and there it's a little darker. So please think about supporting me. I really could use it, really need it. And we got to keep on living. I know you use it's hard to make a buck out there. It's hard for me to make a buck. And so anyway, let's get started. We're going to cover Canicle for Liebowitz, Book of Eli. And finally, we're going to cover a short story by Harland Ellison Jr. called A Boy and His Dog. There's a film of this, which we're also going to talk about. The film is from 1975, and it stars Don Johnson. And this is weird. Also, the music in the movie, some of the music was Ray Manzarek contributed to this soundtrack. Really weird. And it's kind of a cult film. I'd never seen it before. I watched it the other day because the short story just kind of came on my radar, and I was thinking about post-apocalyptic films, and I was aware of the movie, but I never watched it. And it's the inspiration. It was George Miller's inspiration for Mad Max. So it's really bizarre, and the short story is crazy. Maybe we should just talk about that first. We'll talk about this short story first. So it's published in 1969, and it's crazy because the title. I'd always thought from the title that it was like a children's short story. And one of the reasons I didn't read it is because I assumed that it was, it was going to be something bad was going to happen. It's kind of close to my heart. About like it's weird because I know the title, but like every time I'd be out with the dog, I thought about that title a lot. I'm just the boy with his dog. And so that's kind of close to me. I didn't really want to read it, but finally I got around to it. And this is not a children's short story at all. It's pretty hardcore. And Harlan Ellison apparently was a difficult dude, and would not get along with the people that made his movie or like on his sets and stuff. Kind of a wild guy. I don't really know much about him, but I do know that. And this is it's not described as a novella. It's just a short story. But what it's about is the boy and his dog are wandering the proverbial post-apocalyptic wasteland, and there are similarities. I mean, it's crazy because a lot of these, when we're talking about the themes of the post-apocalyptic genre, and it is a genre. I mean, there's so much material out there, it's literary and cinematic material. A lot of these things take place in the West, like in the Western United States. And that's for obvious reasons. At least it's become obvious, probably to us. Think of, for instance, I mean, it's a weird example, but relevant. Think of the Hunger Games. Have you guys read the Hunger Games book, by the way? It's not a bad book. The book is, as with most of these cases, obviously, the book is different from the film and way better. And it's much more serious. I was talking about this on that TNT radio spot yesterday afternoon. I'll drop the links in there when I get the link for the podcast. But we were talking. One of the questions they posed to me was about the importance of reading, and I don't really talk about that much here, but I will. I guess now I'll say something about it. The importance of reading, and about who my audience is, and about education. I think that I don't really talk about that, but that's because this is a this is a stream for grown-ups, and I think that that's important. A lot of content, especially YouTube content, is safe for the non-grown-ups, or made safe for the non-grown-ups, and a lot of the stuff that we hear, in terms of media and from politicians. One thing that's always bugged me about the stupid things that politicians echo when they get their talking points from the Pentagon, or from the psyops department at the three-letter place. One thing that's always bugged me is how everything is always about the future generations, right? It's all about the kids, and I want to make a world better for my grandkids and all that stuff. Now, look, that's in terms of the message. If it was a genuine message, that's fine, obviously, right? That's fine. But it bugs me because it's so transparent and so disingenuous, because that's the vehicle, and especially in terms of politicians, that's the vehicle for we're going to have this message, and we're going to do things. We're going to steer things and culture create for the future, and it's going to be the exact opposite of what we're saying. And we don't care about you living now, right? It's never about us now, and it's never about the grown people. So that's why I like you guys. That's why I like y'all, this audience that we have, because it's important that there's got to. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who talk to the grown people, but like I was saying on the radio spot, the best literature, especially when it's YA literature, is, and I don't read a lot of YA literature, but the best literature and the things that are classic, and that last and that live Um, those are always works of literature that speak to people in an honest and in a way with integrity where they're talking to you like a human being and not talking down to you. Right. So you notice that like even the classic works of young literature that live forever, they have the art form doesn't suffer even though there's kind of a message in there. And I always avoid messages, and the moral when in terms of analyzing literature, because I think that that's not that I'm avoiding morality, but I think that it's important that the morality from a work of literature comes from the page. It comes from the text, right? It has to be in the text. It's not what the author intended. Oftentimes, um, the author doesn't know what they intend. And my example of this is that last weekend, I went to a literature festival, and I sort of reconnected with one of my old teachers. And he's the the most high IQ literature person I've ever known by far. I mean, especially in terms of literature. He's an encyclopedia of literature, like on a vast scale. And I'm serious about this. Like, if people are lucky to get to know people like this, and I was lucky that he was my teacher in school, and he taught. He taught for 50 years, and he was the poet laureate of Virginia twice. And he's a published poet. He's a great poet, and I reconnected with him. I hadn't seen him in about 10 years. And I'm going to speak at his. There's an event that they're having for his retirement. I'm going to go speak at it. But anyways, one of the things that he said during his reading, it's funny because going back and listening to him, even just talk sort of casually introducing poems and talking about poetry and literature, I've noticed again how much of what I think and know comes verbatim from him in the best way. And one of the things he said was that when, he said something about how authors and poets are often asked about what their literature means. What do they intend? What's the message? And he said that the message, oftentimes the message is one of ambiguity, but the everything it comes from the page, right? And that a good example of this would be Robert Frost. And I mentioned this when we did our Robert Frost psychotic poet um, breakdown last winter, I guess. And what would often happen when critics or reporters would ask Robert Frost what his poems meant, what did this mean? What is stopping by woods on a snowy evening mean? What are you trying to say here? And he would sort of give some sort of kind of half-assed explanation, and they'd say, yeah, but what about this line? And he would inevitably say, look, I don't know. I'm just a farmer. I just write it. I don't know what it means. And that statement alone is not factual. I mean, Robert Frost was like hardly a farmer. Um, but what he was saying there, and the truth of that, it's not actually factual, but it's true, is that um, uh, Robert Frost was saying that it doesn't matter what he intended to write or what the message is. If the poet himself needs to explain the work to a crowd, that's just something that's a bonus. That's like a DVD bonus feature. That's extra. Sort of a Gen X reference there. That's sort of extra. It's not something that is necessary. Everything that is intended by the work should be on the page. So I think that's important. It's important. We'll get to this, especially when we're talking about Canticle for Liebowitz. There's a lot that is left off of the page. We discussed this when we talked about Ernest Hemingway. The the process of ellipsis, right, in a work of literature with Hemingway is so significant because what's the form and the content have to work together to produce meaning, right? So if you're reading a work and there's something missing, then it's up to the subtext to determine what the thing is that's missing and why it's missing from the work. And if it's missing from the content or from the form, then the content has to reflect that in the sense that there is a missing memory in what the speaker is living in his life. right? There's something missing in terms of the paradigm or the worldview that one gets from the book. There's something missing from it. Now that would be especially relevant now if you were to write a novel that was set right now in the Great Reset era. You would inevitably, I mean, you would have to have ellipsis, a sort of grand missing absence of things, because look at the things that are missing now, right? I mean, in terms of the way that societal actions take place. Does that make sense? So, um, I don't know what Harlan Ellison intended with his work, but I know what's in the work, and this is it's a striking work. So, okay, so what happens in the short story? So, um, there's a boy and his dog, and this takes place in the Western United States. As I was saying on that whole thread, let's get on this whole train. That's what Lawrence Ferlinghetti used to say, the poet. Um, um, the reason that a lot of these things are set in the West, and that Hunger Games was a great example of this, is that we see that the sort of balkanization that may take place in the United States because of the globists, right? Is uh, seems to be true. Like, imagine that, the that World War III Part Trey takes place, right? Or just that there's a general, there's a civil war, or Part Deux, or just the slow kill, soft kill things happen, and eventually, there's a balkanization within the country, and you have the districts like they do in Hunger Games, and of course, like, these things are always set in the West because, um, in the paradigm of the war, right? All of the targets for the Matthew Broderick War Games thermonuclear war, um, set at 33D, actual live hot war chess game. All the targets are on, most of them are on the Eastern Seaboard, obviously. So the world gets wiped out in the East, and people go to the high ground of the West, and they end up at what's the place? What's the place where they have they lock down the mountain in war games? Cheyenne Mountain. They lock down Cheyenne Mountain, and everything's sort of centered around there. And it also kind of speaks to it in an ironic way. It speaks to how the elites and Hollywood, and sort of general take about flyover states, right, and all that stuff, and about how, yeah, we're on the East Coast, and then we go to the best coast over there, but we're going to fly all over, just completely over the Midwest, because, oh, that's not important. You can drive for a million miles and not see anybody. But those places end up being the places that people want to be. The rural country in the middle of the country, and that actually is what saves the people who live in the post-apocalyptic world after the great, uh, you know, direct energy weapon nuke bomb or whatever goes off, and that's what's taken place in Boy and His Dog. And there's a little bit of H.G. Wells in this, because in the time machine, when you have the Morlocks and the people who live underground and all that, well, that's what you have in this. But it's weird because published in 1969, and one of the reasons I think that this short story is not as well known or as big as it could be, is because the writing suffers. Um, the writing and the language suffers from a kind of contemporaneous vernacular, and what I mean is that there's too much 1969 kind of proto hippie-ish language or sentiment within the short story, and it would serve it better if he had written in a I don't know, in a different kind of, not a different kind of language, but some of the terminology and just the overall, like, the ambiance of the short story is just, it suffers because of that. It's too like young boomerish era. Okay. And I don't know what he, I don't know about him as a writer and what he intended, but there are plenty of works that are from the time period that don't suffer that. If do you know what I'm saying? I mean, even like Jim Carroll's Basketball Diaries, which is like the work of a youth in the 60s and 70s. and he's a poet. I mean, he wrote the book, The Basketball Diaries. It's prose and then forced entries, and he's like in the middle of that in the art world. Um, and that like should have that kind of language in it because it's much more like street slang and where he's living at the time. Um, but even that doesn't like that doesn't it doesn't suffer. The work doesn't suffer because of how he writes. He just write. It's a much more compacted, tighter writing. And I'm not doing like a review of the short story. I'm doing. I think that is important in terms of the analysis of what the work means. Now, on the other hand, maybe he wrote. I guess if I'm going to try to find a reason for why he wrote in this style, it would be because the the protagonist is like a teenager. I mean, he's a boy. He's not really a boy, but he's like Don Johnson was like 26 when he filmed the movie. Of course, he's playing like a late teenager, but also that speaks to the fact that like there are no old people alive in the post-nuke wasteland. Now that's going to be different from when we get to Book of Eli and Canicle for Leibowitz, but in this, it's like it's just the boy and his dog, and his dog is his companion. But what's interesting is that because of the nuclear fallout and the whatever happened with the radiation and the amount of time that's passed, the dog has telepathy. So dogs have like evolved to this point in the short story where um his dog's name is Blood, and the dog can't like um hunt for itself because of its domestication. It can't like go out into the wild and find food for him. Instead, its its ability has evolved into this thing where it can use its instincts to sniff out like what they're needed for like a sort of a greater survival rather than just food. But it also turns into something dark. Like the dog sniffs out and sort of like geolocates victims for the protagonist to assault. Okay. And so it that's why it's not. I mean, this is a grown up short story. Um, and it was really just. I mean, it was shocking when I read it. I couldn't believe like some of the things in this. Not because like I'm some kind of prude or like featherweight in terms of reading the more scandalous stuff in literature. Um, it's just that I didn't expect it. I had this impression in my mind of what this book or what the short story was about all this time, and that's not what it's about at all. So the dog, and it's not just Blood, it's not just his dog, all the people like in the wasteland, and they're all like sort of solo wandering as people with a dog companion. Now you can see why Mad Max took from this, because remember in the Road Warrior, right? In Mad Max 2, like he's got that cool dog, right? That little dog. And he feeds it the tin can of beans or whatever. Shouts out to Base Mel. Listen, I know I'm sort of babbling here, but I'm babbling with a point because I think this is important. This we're not doing a 5 minute fucking excuse my language YouTube video doing a review of the latest bullshit novel, right? Where like the person in the video did it at a farm and they didn't even read that. There's no book. They're holding up a book and there's no title on the book. It's like a cardboard book. They're not looking in the book, and they never actually cite the book at all. And it's just it becomes a list of like, oh, I'm a book blogger or some shit. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's totally synthetic. So we're not doing that. And also, this is what the internet is. Like, this is what the internet is, just talking, right? That's what a live stream is. It's just talking. So, like, that's all anything is. It's just talking. I'm not shouting at y'all, and I'm not shouting. I'm just saying it gets to be, it just gets to be, it's, I feel sorry for people who want that, or who think that that's like all there is, or who are like incapable of like, I don't know, holding two disparate ideas in their mind, and without like losing themselves in emotion or whatever. Because I see a lot of that. We all do, right? Um, so so anyway, the boy, um, who Blood keeps calling him Albert, the boy, the protagonist, they sort of wander through this. this wasteland. They're in the West and Western United States, and eventually, they come to. He finds a girl, who's his age, and he is about to do things to her. He's about to whatever, and it becomes very dark. And there's a surprising reaction because she it becomes what the story becomes is like this love story where you think that they're actually going to fall in love because she's all alone and she needs a companion and like he's the guy. So he's surprised at her reaction. And then this like gang of, the Van Cortlandt Rangers or whatever come and break into this little warehouse where they are, and they're going to take it over. And he snipes a bunch of them, kills them. He's got a car. It's also weird because there was big time synchro in this because I just watched the Book of Eli, and there's a scene where when Eli walks into the town and it becomes kind of a Western, it's like a kind of a meta Western. It's in the West, but it becomes like a sort of a post-apocalyptic, Western. He walks into town like the man with no name, and there's guys on the roof and they're pointing Carcano rifles, Oswald Carcano rifles at him. And in this book, like that's one of the rifles that he has. And so I guess that's because, especially when the book was written, that was in the mind, the public consciousness, the name of that book, the Mannlicher Carcano. And I guess you would assume that that would be one of the go-to rifles that people had because it would be you could mail order it and it was easy to deal with. So there'd be a prevalence of them. So he has one. So he snipes a bunch of the bad guys, and then he makes his way. He makes his way to the middle of the desert, and he finds a door in the darkness, a door. This metal door in the middle of this like desert scape. And he tells Blood, like, look, I'm gonna go down and see what's up. And Blood, the dog, waits for him outside the door. He opens the door. He's got like a pass key, and he goes in. And there's a set of there's a ladder, and so he descends the ladder into where the Morlocks are, where all the elites have survived underground all this time since the nuke, right? So it's kind of like a reverse Jacob's ladder, right, into this hell world. But it's crazy because we see it actually as a hell world. I mean, it is subterranean, but we see it as a hell world, but it's the world that they escape. Like they're going to make a heaven of their hell, right? It's Miltonian. And it's weird because in the film, there's this whole thing about how, like Jason Robards is in it. Jason Robards is great, by the way. I've always liked Jason Robards. He's great in, he was great as a young actor in Long Day's Journey into Night, the Eugene O'Neill play. We should cover that sometime. But Jason Robards was also the dad in Magnolia. You remember that? He was Tom Coombs' dad. That's one of Tom Coombs' best roles. Anyway, so all the elites down there, like they wear, this is crazy. They all wear clown makeup. Like they're wearing this weird makeup. And that, when I watch it, I go, oh, this is clown world. This is literally clown world. So in the future, after the nukes go off or whatever, all the elites are the ones that are living in clown world by choice, right? They're in their world by choice, and they have this synthetic daylight, and there's like fake grass, and they've made this whole subterranean bunker world, right? Remember the video of the guy driving in like the endless tunnels under, what was that, under Denver? Maybe it was under Denver Airport. But there's like the millions of miles of tunnels. There's a whole tunnel system. Remember, like Sam Tripoli posted that the map of the United States and like where all the people have gone missing, and it coincides completely with the tunnels, or whatever. Anyway, so yeah, they're living in clown world, and they need he's like the only young man down there, so they need him to seed, let's say, their population. All they have is like all the young people that are being born are girls, and so they need to extend their system. So they're going to take from him So it's weird because he was going to roip this girl that he found, and then he goes down there, and then that's what they're going to do to him. So it gets reversed, right? And and so he escapes, and then this weird Westworld robot clown man chases him, and there's like crazy 1975 Ray Manzarek, clown Calliope, Anton LaVey keyboard music, playing while it's chasing him, and his robot parts are falling. And the guy has this weird smile on his face. That's in the film. That's not in the short story. But can you believe? Shouts out to Jay because Jay just did the Doors of Perception stream on Aldous Huxley. I know everybody here has seen it. The Doors of Perception. When the doors of perception are cleansed, things will appear as they truly are, infinite, right? That's a Rambodian Blake quote from Proverbs of Hell, Marriage of Heaven and Hell, William Blake. And of course, Aldous Huxley used that. If you guys read that book, I almost did an analysis of it earlier on, but that's not really. I mean, because it's more of a that was perfect for Jay to do. But can you believe that when the Doors broke up because Jim died, July 5th? No, July 3rd, 1971 in Paris. I've been to his grave at the Père Lachaise. Can you believe that the Doors continued as a band? Like, of all bands, to make the mistake of continuing when their guy dies, right? Remember how the Who continued after Keith Moon died? And it's like, dude, they're still going. It's like, at least Led Zeppelin didn't continue when John Bonham died. And the Doors have a whole other album. It's called Other Voices. It is terrible. It's so bad. Now Ray Manzarek did sing. And would oftentimes when Jim was late to a concert, Ray would take over singing, and Ray was not bad, but like without Jim, they're not even, that's just shit. So anyway, it's this weird calliope music and stuff. And then eventually what happens is he takes, he and the girl who's going to be his future bride, his future geopanspermia, Roy bride or whatever. They climb back up the ladder and they walk out of the door in the dark and go out into the desert. And it has a crazy last line. It's a really, really famous last line. And what she says is, well, okay, so he walks out of the door and the door closes, and now they're back in the real world, which is the nuke world. And Blood, the dog, is still lying there, and the dog's been waiting for him all this time. And he says, and Blood is communicating with him telepathically, and he says, have you eaten? And the dog says he found a lizard to eat. So Lizard King, Jim Morrison, he found a lizard to eat. Also interesting because they're kind of like lizard people living down there. But the dog found a lizard to eat, and he says, all right, let's go into town. There's whatever town there is, and we'll find some food. And the dog says, no, we can't go in there because they got the roving Van Cortlandt Ranger Warriors band still in there, and everybody's looking for you because of those guys you killed, so we can't go in there. And he says, let me save you. The dog, also, this is Homeric, because I thought this was pretty good. This is Homeric. This is from the Odyssey, because remember when Odysseus, this is the most famous dog of all time, when Odysseus returns to Ithaca, and he comes to the gates, this is very sad. When he comes to the gates, the first like king that he encounters from the old days, because he's taken all that time to go and fight to fight the Trojan War in the Iliad, and then the Odyssey is his return. And when he gets back, the first person that he sees is Argos, his dog, and his dog has been lying there waiting for his master all these years and is just barely alive, and the dog stays alive long enough to see his master returns and sees Odysseus and then dies. Oh man, that gets me. And of course Odysseus is at that point in disguise because he has to go into town. He don't want to be recognized. So he can get his wife back from the suitors. Remember all that? And Telemachus is still in there. But of course, Argos recognizes him. So the fact that this is in the short story as a literary illusion, I thought was pretty. That was. I appreciated that part because, of course, The girl doesn't. She doesn't recognize the protagonist in the sense that she doesn't know who he is. He just rescued her, and also she really doesn't know who he is because what happens next is crazy. He says, "All right, I'm going to take care of you. I'm gonna pick you up. I'm going to take you into town. We're going to get you something to eat." And his new bride says, "Don't bother. The dog is almost gone. It's either me or the dog." So what do you think happens? He's got to feed the dog. So the next thing that we see is walking off into the desert, and it's just him and the dog. It's a boy and his dog, right? And 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 the dog says something about, "Oh, well, that wasn't a very tasteful situation." So anyway, that's crazy. So let's go over a couple parts of this short story. It's a quick read. He says, it starts off, says, "I was out with Blood, my dog." Also, I like that it's the dog name is Blood, right? Because that's his blood. And you think bloodhound. "I was out with Blood, my dog. It was his week for annoying me, and he kept calling me Albert." That's interesting because that's an interesting way to start the short story because we're in the first person, and already we have a weird kind of intuitive, like unreliable narrator in the sense that we know that the dog is going to right away. We know that the dog is going to be narrating in a sense through the speaker parts of this short story, and that's unusual. That's a lot to take in the first two sentences of a short story, right? Because the dog is calling. First of all, the dog's calling him a name, and the dog's calling him by a name that's not his. And also at this point, we don't know the speaker's name. It was every week for annoying me. Also, the dog's annoying him. Um, he kept calling me Albert. Yeah, I like that Blood survived too. Um, he thought that was pretty damn funny. Hasten Terhune, haha. I caught a couple of water rats for him. The big green and ochre ones, and someone's manicured poodle lost off a leash in one of the down unders. The down unders are obviously the subterranean world. He'd eaten pretty good, but he was cranky. "Come on, son of a bitch," I demanded. "Find me a piece of ass." Uh-oh. Blood just chuckled deep in his dog throat. "You're funny when you get horny, ugh," he said. Whoa, that's a lot to take in the first paragraph, right? You're kind of thinking at this point when he says, "Find me a piece of ass," you're thinking, surely he means like the hind quarters of an antelope. At least that's what I naively thought. But no, he says, "For shame, Albert, after all I've taught you." Not, "I ain't kidding, I'm not kidding." So he shames the human. He knew I'd reached the edge of my patience. Sullenly, he started casting. That's synchro too. You know, I I often think about that interesting, but I often think about like I can remember words in the sense of unusual words along your life along your life journey, man. Do you guys like this? I don't know. Do you remember like where the etymology of words in terms of where you were the first time you heard a certain word or where you learned a word? I mean, I say this because the word sullen, the first time that I ever heard the word sullen was in in that scene in the Doors movie. Remember in that scene, they're about to play Ed Sullivan show, and they're like in the dressing room, and Ed Sullivan comes out, and he's like, can you?" Well, the manager says, "Listen, we just had a problem with one of your lyrics in the song Light My Fire." Where you say, "Girl, we can, we couldn't get much higher. The network doesn't like that, right? So we just thought you'd change it to, girl, couldn't get much better. Can you dig that? Can you dig that?" And Bill Siddons, the manager's like, "Yeah, we can dig it, man. Just get out of here, get out of the dressing room." And then Ed Sullivan comes in and he goes, "And why don't you have a big smile on your face out there when you're playing, boys? You know, nobody wants to see you look sullen." And Jim says, "Well, we're kind of a sullen group, Ed." I love that word sullen. Shouts out to who was that? Let me go back up. Who was that? Shouts out to was that Elias? Shouts out to Elias out there. Drops 9.99 super chat. He says, uh, let me click on this. He says, post-apocalyptic literature. Can I see this? God, I can't expand it. It says post-apocalyptic literature. You're speaking my language, kid. Speaking my language, kid. We're living in the last days. Let's go. Well, thank you for that 9.99 super chat, Elias. Really appreciate you, homeboy. That's the super chats. If you want to support me, please you can drop a super chat, and those will get to me eventually. I really appreciate that super chat. Thank you so much. You guys can also support me in the links in the video in the channel description. I think those get to me right away, and I need the money. I need that money. I'm just gonna put it out there. I need it. I gotta pay the damn bills, and I gotta get some books, and I gotta get some Dollar Menu. Okay, because it's killing me out here. So I know it's killing everybody, but I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And shouts out to my homeboy Matty out there. And he said he also gets this. And so thank you so much, Matty, and shouts out to everybody out there. So I liked that this short story also has the kind of lingo, the sort of future lingo that we get from Clockwork, like in Clockwork Orange. Remember we discussed this in the Clockwork Orange stream. I think I put that in the video description. Go back and watch that Clockwork Orange analysis. Remember we did the Burgess analysis. He says on page 209 of this book, I think it's collected short stories. I just got the damn PDF copy because that's all I could get in time, and because I didn't have any money to buy the book. He says our gang with a rover pack, ROVERPAK, a rover pack. I like that. A rover pack. It had never been able to cut it simply foraging, so they'd opted for comfort and gone a smart way to getting it. They were movie-oriented kids, and they'd taken over the turf where the Metropole Theater was located. No one burst their turf because we all needed the movies, and as long as our gang capitalized, our gang, this is our gang, this is our thing, this is our thing, this is our thing. You come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding, and you ask me this question. You ask me for this favor. I will do you this favor. But there will come a time. There may come a time, there will come a day. You do not know the day or the time nor the place where I may in return. You must do this favor. You come to me, you come, you come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding. Right? Um, so our gang had to access films and did a better job of keeping the films going. They provided a service even for solos like me and Blood, especially for solos like us. So that's their new class, is the solos, and they have rover packs, right? They have gangs of desert wandering perverts, right, who are looking for Morocco Velicet, right, and Drencrum, which is Arduino out there, and they're movie kids. Now this is kind of weird because the movie thing is obviously I don't know if it's obvious, but there's no culture left, right? There's no culture, there's no art, there's just desert. So they still have managed to preserve like films. What they do is like the rover packs will gather in these weird, almost like, I don't know, Burning Man, Pentecostal, desert, Bad Batch camps, like where they set up a screen and they found old films, which are like weird. I don't know, those old grainy, like, 8mm, avert films. Like, remember when Travis Bickle takes the girl and Taxi Driver to the avert film, and that's what they watch because it's all like these two dudes out there in the desert or whatever. But anyway, that's like the only thing they have to watch. But like they that I don't know, that makes me think of how this might be a stretch, but um Like, do you remember in Shadow of the this is one of the great things about Shadow of the Vampire, with William Defoe, William Defoe and Malcatraz, right? John Malkovich, man, monkey. Remember he says that in the movie. It makes me think of how Dracula or Nosferatu um, comes out and he is hired to star in the film Nosferatu, and the crew thinks that he's a method actor, Warlock, but he's actually just the vampire. And there's a scene where Nosferatu, I mean, it's in Nosferatu, the film, where the sun rises. So this is pretty crazy to think about. Just like consider this for a minute. We're so used to films, obviously. I mean, and what's also ironic is that like the young people in this are watching movies and they say they're movie kids, but that's something that's totally gone away because those kids now aren't movie kids. They don't care about movies. There are no, like, yeah, there's the Marvel movies and things are directed at them, but that's the only thing the kids watch. They don't care about movies in the sense that like the Stanley Kubrick monolith, right? Has done away with movies. Like they don't go and watch things on the big screen, especially at post Karanka, go watch things on the big screen like how we did in the, in the 90s. They don't care about that. In fact, if we're going to watch anything, it's going to be TikTok on a Apple Watch, right? After the phone gets taken away. But this is pretty big because Nosferatu is watching the sunrise, and so the vampire obviously can't go out in the daylight. Remember we did our Dracula stream, Bram Stoker. The vampire can't go out into the daylight, and that's because the vampire subsists on basically adreno, right? Sucking the life force out of the innocent to prolong his willful life in darkness, living in eternal darkness, a living death, because he's living a hellish life by choice. So it's a metaphor for damnation, right? The living damnation of the living damnation. I mean, it's obviously also supposed to be, I suppose. I mean, I think that in many ways it's literal, right? I mean, look at Teeter Peel, right? The top people in the pyramid doing just that. And so the vampire can't go out into the light of God, right? Doesn't want to, and is living in eternal darkness, but sees a synthetic light or is illuminated, right, by film, which is crazy. I mean, there's a lot more to that. I think that's crazy, but that in a way is what the characters in the story are doing, right? Because they society, civilization, everything is broken down and crumbled, and the scavengers survive in this short story out in the desert scape where there's always blinding sun mixed with the irradiated sun from the nuclear fallout, but they don't appreciate appreciate in the sort of spiritual sense what sunlight is or what it means to them. And that's echoed by the fact that the elites have gone down into the subterranean world, the down unders, like in the Time Machine, right? So so their life is watching a synthetic sunrise or watching what life used to be, but only in its basest sense, not basest, right? But base and degenerate, because they live according to their instincts and to feeling and emotion. I mean, they live by their instincts and they have nothing else because everything else is gone. and they're so young, there's nobody there to teach them. And in fact, when they in the short story, when they meet the old people are they're even worse, right? Does that make sense? Yeah, go back and watch that Dracula stream, the Bram Stoker's Dracula stream. We analyzed the novel, of course, and then we did the Francis Ford Coppola film, and we also did that movie, The Hunger. We did Mobius. We did a bunch of other stuff. And remember, The Hunger has David Bowie in it. And I happen to have on a side note here, please forgive me for taking a little side note here. But I happen to have a stack of stuff about David Bowie. David Bowie. David Bowie, because I was reading this week. I went back to reading about Station to Station. One magical moment. Right. From Catha to Malkuth. Station to Station is the Berlin Thin White Duke album and song where David Bowie was at the climax, at the peak of his statedly so Al Crowley phase, his satanic cocaine, milk, and red pepper and heroin phase, when he was the proto-Nazi character, the Thin White Duke, and Station to Station was the album that came out of that. And anyway, so I was reading about the lyrics to that song. I mean, the song is the Kabbalah song, right? And his journey, his Kabbalistic journey. I mean, that's in the lyrics. So I was reading about that, and then of course about the lyrics to the song Black Star. We need to do an analysis on that. I mentioned that when we were doing our musical analysis streams way back. And again, shouts out to Ben Dubs out there who sponsored the stream, because he sponsored the stream about Canticle for Liebowitz. So thank you for inspiring me to do this, all the other post-apocalyptic stuff. But he had also mentioned, I think it was Ben, also mentioned doing another lyrics analysis stream, and maybe talking about Oasis, one of my favorite bands of all time. And anyway, somehow that got me to thinking about David Bowie again. So I got all this stuff sitting here about him. But yeah, that was on The Hunger. And so in a way, I mean, what does that have to do with what we're talking about? Well, what I just mentioned, and also the fact that, like, these people are vampirical, and we get a lot of this. I mean, if there are so many relevant themes, and the way that literature is alive, right? The way that literature, great literature in the canon, lives. And I mentioned before that, if you were to write your critical analysis, if you were to write a book on it, for instance, or write a book of analysis on the great works, one of the things that, for instance, Harold Bloom does, he's the best example of this, honestly, is that when you are talking about literature, think back to your college days. When you are writing or talking or discussing literature, one should always do it in the present tense. Number one, it eliminates the need to worry about your tenses when you're writing, and the inevitable error of past to present tense and mixing it up. You don't need to worry about it, talking about it in the present tense, but mainly in a metaphysical sense. I mean, because literature lives. So you use the past tense when you're talking about the past within a work of literature. You're talking about what happened in the past in that timeline. But the literature in general lives. It lives now. And the great literature lives. And I think that the one thing that Bram Stoker gave us, has given us, is the Dracula archetype, because even though Dracula, especially to the more normie audience out there, and even just the regular, just even if you're just going to watch like the Dracula movie, or you're going to watch the new Nick Cage movie, right, Renfield, which is a Dracula movie, and you're going to watch that just for fun, and that's cool, that's fun, that's also a part of it. You also have to enjoy these things, even if you're going to do that. Like, you forget that it stands for something so much bigger, which is the way that the whole system is directed at putting people it's weird because it works on sort of two simultaneous levels. It works at keeping us people, we the people, it keeps us um down, right, at the bottom of their pyramid system, and yet they live in the inverted clown world in the subterranean Morlock world. So they're further down. They are underground, right? Or in other words, I guess just to summarize more succinctly, like I just said before, a willful hell, a hell by choice, right? Um, so and they are living on the and this will obviously become more literal. And this was also in the Brad Easton Ellis short story about Summer in that book, The Informers. Jamie, who is a LA roving vampire, a literal vampire, um, who is feeding on the life energy, the life essence of the innocent. So anyway, all right. So let's get back to this. He says, um, let me find a passage that I can use to illustrate this. He says, um, let's see. We went in. The place was jammed. I was glad the guards hadn't tried to take anything but guns. My spike and knife felt reassuring, lying up in their oiled sheaths at the back of my neck. Blood found two together, and we moved into the row, stepping on feet. Someone cursed, and I ignored him. A Doberman growled. Blood's fur stirred, but he let it pass. There's always some hard case on the muscle, even in neutral ground like the Metropole. I once heard about a get it on they'd had at the old Lowe's Granada on the south side, wound up with 10 or 12 rovers and their mutts dead. The theater burned down and a couple of good Cagney films lost in the fire. They tried to get James Cagney, by the way, as the voice of Blood for the movie because he was still alive. But I don't think he wanted to do it. They ended up getting somebody from the crew to do the voice. And it's pretty dated how they do the Blood of voice. It's like it's a kind of an annoying feature of the film because the voice of the dog is like Kenny, and they did that by choice, but it doesn't work. And also, it's like he talks too much. He talks too damn much in the movie. The dog talks too much. They have too much voiceover. Um, After that, when the Rover Packs had got up the agreement that movie houses were sanctuaries, so they're kind of like new churches, which makes sense with all this stuff, right? Of course, that's how they want it to be anyway, right? You go into the temple of the movie and you look up at the stars, right? The living gods in Babylon, right? I love movies. I'm just saying that's one of the things about it. I mean, Kenneth Anger sort of talks about that with Hollywood Babylon, right? After let's see, he says after that with when the Rover Packs had got up the agreement that movie houses were sanctuaries. It was better now, but there was always somebody too messed in the mind to come soft. It was a triple feature, raw deal, not with Schwarzenegger, but with Dennis O'Keefe, Claire Trevor, Raymond Burr, and Marcia Hunt was the oldest of the three. It had been made in 1948, 76 years ago. Yeah, because it's set in 2024. This whole thing. God only knows how the damn thing hung together all that time. It slipped sprockets, and they had to stop the movie all the time to rethread it. But it was a good movie about this solo who'd been jabbed by his Rover Pack and was out to get revenge. Gangsters, mobs, a lot of punching and fighting, real good. This is Clockwork Orange, right? Remember when he says that they watched some film, and he describes, the splooshy and the blood is flying everywhere, and he talks about it in his own vernacular. This is the same thing. It's also the great irony here. There's the great irony of the fact that the analog technology of the film, like with an actual film reel, those are constantly lost because they're in the big cans, like, and they're not taken care of. That's another reason why they film is in the west because of the dry air. But like if they're stored in some warehouse in New York or something, or they end up getting corroded and they lose these films. That's why they're always having to restore films, and sometimes they're not restorable. which again is another level of irony because because movies as a medium are supposed to be they allow actors to live forever, right? Because they're forever young. As long as you watch Back to the Future, right? Michael J. Fox, he's Marty McFly, and he's young. He's always young. He's not the dude who's doing whatever he's doing now as an old timer. Like imagine Michael J. Fox as an old guy. It's just crazy, right? But he's a real person. And as long as you watch Back to the Future, he's alive and he's young forever, as long as it lasts. But all the stuff has gone digital, and so it's supposed to last forever. But then in the cyber polygon, right, and the nuke explosion, all that gets lost and it's gone. So people have to resort back to analog. Um, it's like remember in 2020 when they shut down the like iTunes and like Netflix and stuff, and they put the black screen up, and they were like, "Oh, we're doing this in protest." And I mean, there was a point there for that day where I was like, well, I'm glad I've got a massive DVD collection and CD collection, so I don't have to. Now I can listen to music. Now that's just one day or whatever that was, but it's also obviously a testing ground for what's going to happen in the future. But it shows that all the media stuff is going to be can be shut down at any time, and you can lose all your stuff. So it's important to have analog, right? It's important to have hard copy books. So he says, let's see, the middle flick was a thing made during the Third War in 07. So there was a third World War in 2007, 2 years before I was even born. Thing called I can't read the title of that. It was mostly gut spilling and some nice hand to hand. Beautiful scene of skirmisher greyhounds equipped with napalm throwers, jelly burning a Chinese town. Let's call it a Chinese town. But it's interesting because, like he says in this, the Third World War is against the Chicoms, right? Blood dug it, even though we'd seen this flick before. He had some kind of phony chuck going on that these were ancestors of his, and he knew, and I knew he was making it up. What? Oh, I can't read this part. Even that is too much for the stream. Let's see. Let's see. He says almost every seat in the theater was taken with solos or their dogs. If a chick had slipped in there, there'd have been a riot. She would have been ripped to pieces before any single guy could have gotten into her. Where? I asked softly. All around me, the solos were, they're doing pervert stuff, moaning as the blondes took off their masks. And I can't read that. I mean, this is wild. It goes into Skittles stuff, of course, because these people are degenerates. And it goes into Skittles stuff. Have you all seen that movie, The Bad Batch? It's actually not bad. It's got Kinko Reeves in it as a cult leader. But they're doing all the cannibalism stuff. But there's also it just reminded me of that because there's a lot of Skittles going on. In chapter 2 of this short story, it says altering surgery and grafting had been done. The first successful product of this cetacean experimentation had been a 2-year-old pulley named Abu, who had communicated sense impressions telepathically. So they did. So another thing they did is they did like human dog experimentation. They're making human animal pig chimeras, folks. I've never seen. What does he say? I've never seen an arachnid melded with a spider monkey. 20 years ago, underground below the botany department at UT Austin, my granddad taught me this. They put a spider. What does he say? They put spider skin on a man, and they gave him spider shields. Have you seen that clip? Awesome. Anyway, that's what they were doing in the short story to the dogs and the people, and they make them telepathic. It's also part of the radiation fallout. I don't need you to tell me that I'm okay. Telepathic over short distances, easily trained, able to track gasoline or troops or poison gas or radiation when I linked with their human controllers. They had become the shock commandos of a new kind of war. The selective traits had bred true Dobermans, Greyhounds, Akitas, Coolies, and Schnauzers had become steadily more telepathic. Ginger and Abu had been Blood's ancestors. He had told me so 1,000 times, had told me the story just that way, in just those words, 1,000 times, as it had been told to him. I've never believed him till now. Maybe the little bastard was special. So his dog, crazy because his dog is the one who passes on the sort of Homeric oral tradition of the past, because the people can't remember it. They can't remember what happened in the past. So the dogs end up carrying it on. I mean, that's crazy. Um, how any like work where it involves especially a journey, is essentially an odyssey, because and the journey is always functions as the external view of the inner journey of the characters. But it's crazy that is Homeric, that's still continues to be something Homeric. We need to do an Iliad analysis. Maybe even just um the Achilles speech, some of the Achilles scenes in the Iliad or the Agamemnon. I don't know. Well, I'll look back at the Iliad. Would you all like that? I mean, we haven't done any. Well, we did Sophocles, but we need to go back and do some ancient Greek, right? So I've been trying to. Shouts out to Jason out there. Hey, shouts out to Jason, out there, because Jason has supported me. He sent me some super chats this week. So thank you so much, Jason, for supporting me. That really helps. Just when I think I'm not going to make it because I run out of fucking GMO nuke cans of SpaghettiOs in the cabinet, and I need to get some dollar menu, Jason comes in there with the big dono. So thank you so much, Jason. And what did you say? You said, where did I get that mic? I got this mic from my sister. My sister gave me this mic because she's the best sister in the world. But I'm still working on the damn audio levels because they all reset after an update. And then I don't know, something else happened, but I couldn't get the audio levels up to what they were. And I'm just trying to get it. I'm sure I got some people out there who are audio experts. I cannot get it so that it doesn't sound like flat. I don't know if that is, I don't know what's going on, but it's hard with with the Shure app. It's hard to get the levels so that I don't have to put my face right up into the microphone like this to talk. Right. I want it so it's like DPH's mic, right? Where he can just talk, and I got a kind of a ambiance, and I cannot get it. It keeps resetting, and I don't know what to do with that. So maybe somebody can help me out with that in the comments. Um, I'm, I'm kind of boomer teching it. He takes sanctuary in a YMCA, which is interesting. It's like the last vestige of anything Christian in their world. And he explicitly states that in the short story on page 226 here. He said YMCA, that meant Young Men's Christian Association. Blood taught me to read. So what the hell was a Young Men's Christian Association? Sometimes being able to read makes more questions than if you were stupid. And he goes down and he tracks this girl. The door was hanging on the hinge, and I stepped over through the inverted triangle. There was moonlight coming through the busted windows because their view has been busted. His psyche's about to be, this girl's psyche's about to be shattered. And their view to the outside world is complete. The inside is the outside. And and let's see. Coated with nicotine. Nah, it's not coated. I keep this plate clean. So let's see. Slipped out, burning my hands on the outside lip of the hatch. Oh yeah, the hatch The hatch, the door in the dark, which is a Seamus Heaney quote. The door in the dark is from his book. The hatch is uh I tried to start rewatching Lost this week because there was nothing else on, and I wanted something just mindless to watch because it's been a tough week. It's been a like in all seriousness, this has been a really really tough week. I mean, I know I'm not going to give you TMI here, but it's late April into May, which is always I'm always conscious of this. This always happens, late April into May is that old satanic fire season, right? Um, and all the demons are running wild and Walpurgis knocked and Mayday coming up and all that shit. And so fuck you, Satan. And tell that devil get behind you and get on back there, right? Because this has been a tough week. A lot of stuff always happens like this. And I mean, I know on a geopolitical scale it always happens. And there's a lot of stuff that happens in late April. Um, like April 29th into May 1st and all that bullshit. But whatever, man. But it's been a tough week, and it's another one of those weeks where um, life is crazy, isn't it? Right? Life is crazy. You know, um, you know people, right? You know people, and they're living, and they're there 1 minute, and all of a sudden they're gone. They're not there. They're not there the next day, right? And we all deal with that. Everybody. I mean, we're all going to be part of that. Everybody who ever Everybody who was ever here has died, right? But that's crazy. It's been a crazy week. I don't really want to say much more than that. I probably shouldn't have even said that, but um, what a hell of a week. So I don't know why I even brought that up. Oh, because I was trying to watch just some mindless stuff, and I tried to watch Lost again, and I thought I would never rewatch Lost because I was so pissed at that TV show. Um, uh, I used to watch Lost back in the day every week, my sister and I would, when I would go down there to see her, she was in Florida at the time, and then down south when I'd go visit her, I remember we would watch Lost, and or I'd go and see her when she was in Williamsburg. We'd watch Lost, and it was just one of the things, it was just fun. Or I used to watch it when I was in Northern Ireland. Is when it like the first couple seasons were on, and I remember I would sit in my wee flat and Lost would come on, and like, anybody who's lived abroad, I'm sure shares this, like where it's crazy because, you're even when you're living in Britain or in the UK, you know, um, it's the little things that give you a sense of home, right? Which is necessary. You need those little things. And I always loved it when I had this little TV in my room. I think this was in grad school. I had this little TV in my room, and there's this Malaysian dude living above me and on the floor above me. And this guy used to clunk around all the time. And my friend Gavin would come over and he would, he'd pick up the chair at my desk and throw it at the ceiling. And one day he went upstairs and he goes, "What are you clunking around for?" And the guy didn't clunk around after that. But anyway, so I was sitting in my room and I loved it when I had Channel 4 and I had BBC and BBC 1, 2, and American movies would come on, like especially on Sunday night, but they would show Lost and Family Guy. And like those always it made me feel like, oh, I'm back at home just for this minute. Anyway, so I watched Lost and and it was cool. But then I got so pissed at the end of it because obviously, like everything, every other long form, like many other long form series, television shows before this sort of renaissance with television, which came in, the around like what 2014, with things like True Detective um and Breaking Bad, 2007 and 2012. But that sort of brief high point in great writing and television shows. Lost was like well written at the beginning, at the end, they did that thing, which is the cardinal sin in literature and in film, which is, oh, we don't know how to end it. So it was all a dream. They were dead the whole time. And that's not who gives a shit about the spoiler alert? Because now that anybody who's seen the show, when you know that, why would you ever go back and rewatch the thing? But anyway, I tried to go back and rewatch I'm probably going to go back to it just because I want to look at some of the revelatory things in the show, like with the Dharma Initiative and all that and the numbers. And um, go back and see if there's, what I can get from that. But it reminded me of the hatch in Lost in this story. And also what another thing that I thought is probably more relevant is in Stranger Things season, was it 3 or the brief 4? You remember that the doctor, who's essentially the MK Ultra Dr. Green, takes 11 down the hatch in the middle of the desert to do the final experimentation at the Stargate. And I think honestly, like, if this isn't a real place where this was filmed, like that hatch in the desert, I mean, those exist, but like it's the exact same place. They must have filmed A Boy and His Dog in the same place where they filmed that Stranger Things. We actually did a Stranger Things analysis. Remember, the Stargate Monarch stream of what was that, season 4 maybe? I also talked about that recently with the Keep about Stranger Things. I'm not trying to like promote and go back and watch the streams. I mean, yeah, it'd be great if you did that. The reason I keep bringing all these up is because of, again, the landscape of literature and how everything seems to be a prerequisite. It's all the things are in this big web where they all inform each other and they inform your worldview, right? So anyway, let's finish up with The Boy and His Dog. I told you how it ends, and what it says at the end of the short story here is page 245. It was a small fire, not nearly big enough for my rover pack to spot from the outskirts of the city. No smoke. And after Blood had eaten its fill, I carried him to the air duct a mile away, and we spent the night inside on a little ledge. I held him all night. He slept good. In the morning, I fixed him up pretty good. He'd make it. He was strong. He ate again. There was plenty left from the night before. I didn't eat. I wasn't hungry. We started off across the blast wasteland that morning. We'd find another city and make it. We had to move slow because Blood was still limping. It took a long time before I stopped hearing her calling in my head, asking me, do you know what love is? Sure, I know. A boy and his dog. Fucking yes! Good ending. Good ending. Fucking true. Excuse my language. But that is true. If any of that's true, that's true. That is love. And it's crazy because it's obviously mixed up with what happened to the girl, right? And that's no good. But the girl was one of the Morlocks anyway, and was trying to do that to him. So I don't know. So I think it's just an ironic ending, but that is true though. Shouts out to Frankie D out there who says, is reading the book Don Quixote of any use in the discipline of literature, or is that one too obscure for the Western ethos? Say what you will about the tenets of National Socialism, but at least it's an ethos. Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov. Man, good question. Thank you for the $4.99 super chat. Oh yes, Don Quixote is a great book. It's Cervantes. Shouts out to Kim out there. Lovely Kim. Lovely Kim. We love our Kim. Lovely Kim, who recommended reading Don Quixote a long time ago. Shouts out to Kim. Love you. And we need to do that book. We need to bring that up, and we need to do that book. Hey, you know what? Somebody out there, please, why don't you do a sponsor stream? Somebody please send me that fat Benjamin. Send me $100 to do Don Quixote, and I will do that. If you want me to do a work of literature, if you want me to do that one, send me some money, and I will spend a significant amount of time and do that book. We need to cover it. If you got any other ideas of things you want me to cover, give me a whole list, and I'll do those. We got Benjamin Franklin coming up. You see Sam Tripoli talking about how they found all those skeletons in the closet, literally. in the basement, in the Morlock basement of Ben Franklin's house. Um, yeah, so Don Quixote is one of the great works of Western literature, and is I I don't know what the accurate word to use to describe its significance in terms of our thought. It's not underrated because it's not underrated. It is the great work of Spanish literature, but it's also the first novel. I mean, that alone is important. And the quixotic storyline and chivalry, youth and old age, wisdom, and the love of Dulcinea. We need to read that. I actually, um, my Spanish teacher. I took Spanish for 8 years. You're in America when you take Spanish for 8 years and you you know the language from the vocab words, and from the literature that you have to translate, but it's all shit until you actually do some kind of immersion and go to the place. Uh, but that's fine. Yeah, no, but I had to translate Don Quixote, the novel. We had to do that in my final year of Spanish. My excellent teacher, Senor Nystrom, made us translate the whole book. So, but yeah, Cervantes was a contemporary of Shakespeare, and we need to do that book. Shouts out to Amtown who drops $2, and she says, "Is a movie $50?" If you want me to do a film, if you want me to do a film analysis, good question there. Yes, as I said along, I should reiterate that if you want me to do a film, if you want me to do a movie, drop me $50 and I'll do that. I love the ideas. People um, have been doing a lot of communicating, and I appreciate that you can contact me on Instagram at Baselit Analyzer, or you can email me and give me movie ideas. Had a lot of great movie ideas. Shouts out to Block Party who wants me to do an analysis of Michael Clayton. And so I'm definitely going to do that. Shouts out to look, there's Block Party right there. $5. Shouts out to Block Party who sends $5 and says, "Sorry about your week, brother. We love you, Kang." I appreciate that, and the fact that it comes from my homeboy Block Party Vintage out there means so much to me because you are one of my good friends, and that's meaningful to me, and I know you love me, and thank you so much, homeboy. And so I'm going to do that Michael Clayton analysis for him. That's a great movie. So, yeah, if you want me to do a movie, drop me $50 and I'll do that. I mean, look, the fact is, like, everybody's busy. I used to hate it when people would say, "I'm too busy to do something." It still does kind of annoy me in a way because it's like the adage, if you want something done, give it to somebody who doesn't have time to do it. They know their time management and they know how to work things, and that's life, and, we're all grown people. We can do that. But, at the same time, like, things have been busy. I've been pretty busy, and I'm thankful for that, right? I know y'all are busy too out there. Everybody's trying to make a buck, but, hopefully the radio thing will continue. I think, hopefully we'll be on Boiler Room soon. We were gonna be on there Thursday night, but the server melted down. Hey, shouts out to Amy out there at Amtown who drops me $50 to do that film. So thank you so much, Amtown. Really appreciate you. Wow, that means a lot to me. That helps me get through. And yeah, I'm not trying to be mysterious about like anything. I'm not trying to be a downer about talking about like personal things in my week because, and also I'm just a dude like everybody else. But we all go through this, and it's crazy. When it rains, it pours, and the bad shit happens, and you lose people. Um, but there's also, um, you know, people will often say, in the bad times, don't lose hope, and that's important, and I appreciate that. Um, I'm thankful and blessed that I've never lost hope. I've never, and I'm not bragging, folks, but I don't lose hope. Um, you abandon all hope when you enter that city of dis, and hopefully none of us will. But there's no reason to lose hope. You don't need to lose hope. Not in the long-legged back daddy, right? Oh, Mama and Larry Sinclair had a fabulous love affair. Oh, Mama, smoking PCP in the back of a Cadillac Escalade. You remember that? Yeah, not in that sense. Not in the 2008. sense of hope, Shepherd Fairy hope. I'm talking about hope. There's no reason to lose hope, right? There's no reason to lose hope. We all live and die, you know? It happens to everybody. And the bad things happen. And that's, you know, most of the time that's people doing that, right? The people are the ones who make things shitty. It's the people. We live in a fallen world. It's the people who do shit, right? We do it. We do it to ourselves. We self-destruct. Um, there's no reason to lose hope. But there is a reason, there's a time for everything, right? In the ecclesiastical sense, in the proverbial sense, there's a time for everything. Everything happens. And there's a time to grieve, right? So, you got to keep on going. But um anyway, we're having a good time tonight, and I thank you all for being here with me, and I appreciate you, and I'm glad to be here. And again, I'll be on DPH tomorrow night. Let's talk about this book, Mechanical for Liebowitz by Walter Miller. Now, this might not be a book that you've heard of. You might not have heard of this book, but actually it's an important book in the of post-apocalypticism in terms of literature. Look how broken up this book is. This book is falling apart. It's in 4 or 5 different pieces. This book is so beat up. And it's crazy because the guy I mentioned earlier, my teacher, who he was my AP English teacher, and I took really, I mean, more of a mentor, really, and a friend now, and he was the poet laureate. Anyway, I remember when he gave me this book. He gave me this book in 1999 because he would, you know, I would, I would walk into class and we talk about, I don't know. I remember that day we were talking about Baudelaire, and we're talking about Baudelaire and what else? Like Ezra Pound that morning when I walked into class, and he said, "You need some more. Let me give you some prose to read." So he talks. So he gave me John Barth, The Floating Opera. He gave me Richard Brautigan, Trout Fishing in America. I read both of those, and he gave me A Canticle for Liebowitz by Walter Miller Jr. And I read the other 2, but I did not read this book. And I purposefully didn't read it. He must have bought this for 50 cents back in the day at the book rack in Richmond. Anyway, I did not read this book purposefully because I didn't like the cover of the book. Don't judge a book by its cover. You can do that. That's fine. Who gives a shit, right? That statement is really for people who don't read anyway, right? That's just that's one of those cliche things. You gotta have good cover art on your book or no cover art, You read a damn PDF copy if you can't afford the book. But um but yeah, so I didn't read it. I didn't like what the story was about in terms of reading about the book. I've been reading about the book for years, but I just never wanted to dive into it. But I've had this copy of this book sitting in my stack since 1999, and all of a sudden, Ben dropped that Benjamin and said, "Read the book." So I thought, yeah, okay, fine, I'll dive into it. And honestly, I got to say, like the who amongst us doesn't love or appreciate the sort of, especially the post-apocalyptic dystopia. I love that, especially as a genre, because um, I love that's the same reason I love disaster movies or disaster books, because you always see yourself in the work, and or I suppose you should. And I always imagine, like, what would I do in this situation? What would it be like? Kind of like when you're young and you're a young lad, and you're out in the woods, playing war, right? It's like that. But I don't like. I don't know if I can even verbalize what it is that turns me off about a book like this. But it's not real. It's not actually my type of book. This book is not really my book. And I think it might be because of um the overt uh, philosophical dynamic in the book. Not that it's philosophy. That doesn't turn me off. It's just that the book is overridden by philosophy. And um the other things take a back seat. Now, I don't know if it makes sense to people, like, because I love the great literature that it doesn't matter if it's an adventure story. I don't even like reading novels that much. Um, but this is it's different. So okay, so what happens in Mechanical for Leibowitz? What's it about? Well, it's a triptych because it's in three parts, and it's interesting because there are three phases in the book. There's fiat, homo, let there be man, fiat lux, and fiat voluntas tua. And they represent, like, it's kind of supposed to be the the early period of man up through the Renaissance, and then what I see it as is the Enlightenment is the second phase, and then there's in a way, it's like the Great Reset era into the far future, but all of it takes place in the future. So it's like it's like three ages of man, um, recreated in a cycle in the future, right? And so what? So basically, there's been a nuclear war, and everything is wiped out, and there's the fallout from the radiation has mutinized most of mankind. They're like roving bands of mutants in this. Human, animal, pig chimeras and goat people are like all over the place. And there is, and of course, it's set in the West. It's sort of set between like Salt Lake City down through, um, down through, like Arizona and New Mexico. And there's a monastery. And so one of the themes of the book is a kind of dialectic that arises where you have Christianity versus what we would see now is evident as scientism, because because there's like a neo-industrial revolution that occurs in the book with a scientific revolution, and then it becomes this sort of conflict between the two. Now, one of the things that one of my I don't know if it's not an original insight into the book, probably, but my own insight in the book is that basically, um, that the way that morality is viewed in the book, morality and values, and this is one of the messages in the book. There's not like one of the messages that I read into the book is that they are the characters are saying that morality in general needs to evolve in a progressive sense, and even that religion and Christianity need to evolve because it needs to keep up with the advancements in science. Which you read this now and you're like, of course it's going to say that. And what's crazy to me is that reading this, I can already tell that, and I haven't done much like reading into the critical, into any of the critical analysis of the books that's published out there. But I can already say or predict. I know that's what they're gonna grab, and they're gonna go, oh yeah, of course, because that's the way that everybody goes in the world. When it's actually the opposite that's true, right? Because all of us know this. We see this in every single debate, right? Where the foe is constantly arguing about um a some sort of personalized, egocentric, ungrounded view of truth. That truth is subjective, essentially, right? Whereas truth Truth is obviously objective. Truth, capital T, is objective and grounded, and God gives us that. There's no truth without God. There's no truth without God. That's what Christianity gives us. And that it doesn't, that it shouldn't, it should not evolve into some subjective thing that to keep up with science, because even on the just on the very bare on the surface of it, anyone can see with what we've just gone through. If you didn't know anything else, you could see that all of the science that we are always told to listen to, the EXPERTS, right? They will even state that it is not constant, it's not a proof, it's a theory, and that everything has to, it just keeps evolving with the evidence. In other words, there isn't really evidence, and even the evidence is analyzed and is subjective, right? And that doesn't go for the whole thing in general, but for the big things, right? And so that can't determine your morality or what truth is. So it's just, that's one of the things that is just like about the book, is that I can see the conflict in the book, and yet, like, it sounds like I have this great, I don't know what it sounds like. Maybe I that's one of my great criticisms of the book, or maybe it's just something that I reacted to in the book. That's in there that Walter Miller is astute enough to put into the narrative, right? Yeah, you gotta be well, I mean, you never know, right? You gotta be careful, right? Mellow Forza, about some of these words. That seems to be a hot word. So, it's probably not. I'm just in the habit of, it's crazy because I'm just in the habit of doing that, from being here and from what we know about platforms. And like like when I was on that um Joseph Arthur show late night last Saturday night, um I I just by habit kept talking about Karanka and the stabby, and he was like, "No, you can say whatever you want here because they have the platform, so you can actually say it." And it feels crazy. It feels crazy to have to use stupid code all the time, and it feels crazy to actually be able to say the words like in real life, right? That's crazy. Um, y'all talking about Jury, our homeboy Jury? Yeah, he's it's Robbie. He's gonna be all right. Prayers uh, for Jerry out there, a homeboy. Go to his channel after this if you haven't seen it, and check out his channel update number 2. We love Jerry out there. So so anyway, the reason it's a canticle for Leibowitz, the canticle, it's the song of Leibowitz, right? In the religious sense, is because at the monastery in the West, and again, this is that thing where America has been balkanized, and there's like a new king, and there's a Lord of Denver in the movie, and there's no movie in the book. Yeah, Kristen, I got to talk like got to put on my big boy pants. You guys, I still like all the time randomly think of Jay's Berbertunes stream, and like it just. I'm sure this happens to y'all. Like, and it just, when he was doing that stream, he said, he said, he said, "I put on my big boy pants." You remember and he was doing the tunes. If you don't know what I'm talking about right now, it was Jay's party stream. It was the big party stream, the Boomer Tunes stream. Over at Jay's Analysis. Yeah, I still think of that randomly. Anyway, anytime I see that phrase that Kristen just said, like a big boy, that's what I think of. Put on my big boy pants. Like, anyway, so Let's see. All right, so Walter Miller Jr. A second. I gotta empty out this ashtray and get some more cigarettes. Give me a second. Tim out. Tim out. And Jeff Foxworthy. Boomer music. Boomer tunes. Yeah, pour out some liquor for our homies. I don't drink liquor. Pour out some liquor for your homies. There's a ghetto up in heaven and it's ours. Black power is what we scream as we dream in a paranoid state, and our fate is a lifetime I hate. Dear mama, can you save me? Fuck peace, because the streets got a babies. They gotta eat. All right, so nom de plume drops $9.99. Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Thank you for that super chat. This week turns around for you, sending love, and we'll keep you in prayers. Appreciate you and the streams. Hey, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. That does mean a lot. When I say that means a lot, I'm not just saying some bullshit. That does mean a lot. Sorry for all my cussing, but we're all grown ups here, and I think that's fine. I'm trying. I just I'm not I don't go around cussing like some crass, uh, uncouth, unlearned person, but I'm hanging out here with my friends, my homeboys, y'all out there, my homegirls, and it's Saturday night. Isn't this Saturday night? So we're all grown up, so that's fine. Walter Miller Jr. was in the Second World War. Um, let's see. This says I'm reading it. What is this? This is from is this New York Times? Yeah, it's from the New Yorker. This is about the books from the New Yorker. I just pulled a quick article. Um, from 1943 to May 1944, the hill on which the abbey stood was the center of one of the largest and bloodiest battles of the Second World War. Monte Cassino was a crucial part of the Gustav Line, a string of fortified German defenses that bisected in anticipation of the Allied push toward Rome. Hitler ordered that the Gustav Line be upgraded to fortress strength. Seeing the opportunity for a propaganda victory, the Nazis helped the monks box up many of the abbey's treasures and transfer them to safety before the fighting began. Most of the monks then fled. The abbey had been sacked many times by the what's this? I can't read it. There's marked over the Longobards, 580 something. Was it 381? The Saracens in 884, and by Napoleon nearly a millennium later. And with each reconstruction, the abbey took on more of the characteristics of a citadel, which brings to mind the keep, which we just did. And also, this made me think of reading about Walter Miller. Made me think of my granddad. This guy can't even not lick my granddad's boots. But they were, my granddad was a he they were both in the army though, and in World War II. My granddad was a great man, and flew a B-24. In his B-24 was called the Wolf Wagon, and he was part of the bombing in the Ploesti oil fields in Romania. I think he was stationed out of Italy and maybe Tunisia, but he was all over the area. So this sort of made me think of this. But what happened was, this says on February 15th, 1944, American B-17s, B-25s, and B-26s, so not B-24s, dropped more than 400 tons of explosives on the monastery. Filming of the bombing can be seen on YouTube. Hundreds of civilians who had taken refuge there were killed. A handful of monks and other survivors left the abbey the next day. The fighting continued for another 3 months before a group of Polish soldiers planted their nation's flag among the ruins of the monastery, signaling an Allied victory. One of the American airmen who participated in the bombing of Monte Cassino was a young radio operator and tail gunner from Florida named Walter M. Miller Jr. Tail gunner. My granddad, I think, was top turret. Um, who enlisted in the Army after the attack on Pearl Harbor, flew on more than 50 combat missions in B-25 Mitchells above the Mediterranean region and the Balkans. Following the war, he got married, studied engineering at the University of Texas. I wonder if it was at UT Austin in the botany department. Um, and um, converted to Catholicism. He converted to Catholicism. In the 50s, he began publishing stories and novellas and amazing stories, Galaxy, Astounding Science Fiction, and other magazines. Miller wrote scripts for the popular television show Captain Video and his Video Rangers. That was a show. I never heard of that damn show. Sounds like Captain Planet. That's terrible. I'm sorry. The list of writers for Captain Video includes some of the biggest names in mid-century science fiction: Arthur C. Clarke, James Blish, Isaac Creeper Asimov, and Jack Vance. Arthur C. Clarke was Creeper too, wasn't he? Ugh. Miller is best known for the only novel he published in his lifetime, A Canticle for Liebowitz. Composed of a trilogy of novellas that originally appeared in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, Canticle, which was released in 1959, has never been out of print, selling more than 2 million copies. While it hasn't attracted the following enjoyed by The Lord of the Rings or even Dune, it remains a hugely influential book and a landmark of post-apocalyptic fiction. Along with Ray Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles. Hey, we just did Ray Bradbury. We just did Bay Bradbury. With Fahrenheit 451, right? Let's get the light a little better in here. There we go. Along with Ray Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles, A Canticle for Liebowitz was one of the first novels to escape from the science fiction ghetto and become a staple of high school reading lists. Its legacy can be seen in the works of Gene Wolfe, Margaret Atwood, and many other speculative fiction authors who came after him, as well as in the current flood of end-of-the-world novels, TV shows, and movies. The book's first novella, Fiat Homo, Let There Be Man, is set in a monastery in the Utah desert some 600 years after a nuclear holocaust known as the Flame Deluge. It's a pretty good. It is amazing how he describes the post nuclear war in this, and then later the next nuclear war in the far future of the final section, because the bomb that drops at the end is like fire in the sky, and it's called Lucifer. So when the bomb drops, the monks will say, Lucifer is fallen, that's pretty intense because the light and destruction, the false light and destruction is falling from the heavens, and is gonna obliterate the world. And what happens in the final section is, they board an Elon Musk off to, where do they go? They go to Centauri. I think the Centauri system. They got to stop by Dagobah, but they get on a spaceship and they go out. They're going off world, right? Of course. So what's crazy is that now is like a trope of, the space genre and even the post-apocalyptic genre. But this is early on. This is Walter Miller, and this is early on in 1959. And there wasn't a plethora of this type of literature at the time. And like it says, I mean, they do, it's the New Yorker, but they do, that is a good point to bring up, that this helped science fiction as a genre escape from the sort of ghetto of, popular, like, magazines looked down on by the literati, and make it into something respectable, right? Yeah, Jethro says plan. We're gonna initiate Plan R. Sorry, Colonel Kong. All right, let's see what we have in here. This is our set. We've got in our survival kit. Morphine. What does he say? Morphine, nicotine, one set of pantyhose. Shoot, fella have a pretty good time in Vegas with all that. That's crazy how uh, in Doctor Strangelove, I know everybody knows this, but I do think it's just one of those things that it's crazy in Doctor Strangelove how you watch it and it is it's stated, it's obvious when you watch it once you notice it, especially that part is overdubbed because originally uh Major Kong says Paul could have a pretty good time in Dallas with all that. But the film was released right after um the big November 19, the big JFK event. And so they had to change it to Vegas. But Vegas, it's a happy accident because Vegas ends up being more appropriate for that anyway. Right. Anyway, um, it says, "Oh, the flame deluge is interesting because it's this is obviously like a neo biblical allegory, right? Where the deluge, the great flood, is going to wipe out the earth, and the survivors have to get in an ark, right? And but this time it's fire. It's a river of fire, right? The war caused a backlash against learning and knowledge called the simplification, which wiped out almost all traces of civilization. Most of the people on Earth are illiterate. Many are deformed by radiation. The monks who reside in the monastery are devoted to honoring the memory of Isaac Edward Leibowitz from Los Alamos, who was murdered for his efforts to safeguard scientific knowledge in the aftermath of the conflict. They collect and transcribe the Leibowitz memorabilia, they call it the memorabilia, including shopping lists, technical documents, and circuit diagrams that they cannot even begin to understand. The protagonist of Fiat Homo is a bumbling but well intentioned novice named Francis, who during a Lenten fast in the desert accidentally discovers the fallout shelter Leibowitz used. This discovery results in Leibowitz's elevation to sainthood. Francis makes the treacherous journey to New Rome to witness the canonization and is killed by mutant tribesmen on his way back to the abbey. Okay, so there's a lot in that. And there's a lot in this in terms of the actual book because there are obviously parallels with White Noise, right? And Don DeLeo. That's how I say it. With and with postmodernism, like because of the scientism, um, the language that the high priests of scientism use to describe their documentation, right? Says this is sort of neo-religion, but what he says in the book is what happens in the book is basically that, like, again, well, there's a monastery, there's a novice out there, and unlike in A Boy and His Dog, where he goes into the subterranean world and discovers the clown world, in this one, he kind of does that because the clown world element is the memorabilia stuff, but he is going down into a fallout shelter. Remember how big fallout shelters were? And there was like that huge explosion in fallout shelters during the JFK era. JFK again. Kind of like now there's the people building the bunkers. And so the novice goes down there, and he like moves a rock and he sees that there's a ladder and he goes down into the fallout shelter. And when he goes down into it, he finds this memorabilia, which is essentially just junk. But in the future, they don't know that it's junk because there's like no written words. So that's why it's the Middle Ages, right? Which is the Dark Ages, but is actually an illuminated age in a good way, in the sense that, and you get the pun there because the monks, right? The Christian monks are preserving the written word and knowledge and all of the classic texts, obviously. But also they're literally illuminating the texts. And so that's what happens with Francis, is that he goes down and he finds this, like, this kid, I don't know what this is. It could just be a circuit diagram from some electrician in the past. But because that's all they have, they think this Leibowitz guy is a saint because well, what he does is he takes his text and he transcribes it and illuminates the text. It's got gold leaf or gold filling in the text. So what happens is he makes his way to go see the Pope? Is it the Pope of New Rome out in the desert? He has to make this journey across the wilderness, right? He goes into the wilderness, and he's on his fast, right? So he goes out and he gets robbed, like he gets mugged by this group of mutant people, survivors, and they think that like what he has is super valuable, and he tells him like, look, I took, is it 15 years or 30 years? I think it's 30 years. He's like, I took 30 years to do this, to work on this. And their response is like, you wasted 30 years working on this book. Well, thank goodness that we had monks, in real life who spent 30 years illuminating texts in righteous work. And because 30 years for them means I don't know if it's infinite, but it's the proliferation of the great works, the biblical works and classical works that we read now. So anyway, so they rob him, and they think that the valuable text is the one that he's illuminated because it's got the gold in it. But thankfully, they think for him, they think that the memorabilia piece that he has, which is actually the original work, is junk. So they let him take it. So he goes off and he delivers it um, to. Does he go to New Rome? He goes off and he delivers it, and he talks to the big time monks, and they tell him, "No, this is blessed work that you've done, and this is great." And so then when he's on his way back to the monastery, the last thing that happens is he gets shot in the head with an arrow. And that's like the end of the section. But but his life had a purpose and he got there. And it also just shows the sort of ubiquitous violence even in the desert. And that, of course, is one of the tropes of post-apocalyptic literature. And we're going to see that in the Book of Eli coming up. Um, so so let's see. It says the second novella, it's really the second part of the kind of a triptych. Fiat Lux, Let There Be Light, takes place hundreds of years later in the 32nd century. Like most middle parts of trilogies, it is the least compelling. I disagree with that. Um, the long belly of a Dacian slung between two pairs of sturdy legs, as Peter Matthiessen characterized the second volume of his Watson trilogy. After more than a millennium, mankind is on the cusp of emerging from the dark ages brought about by the flame deluge. So it's a kind of renaissance, right? Hostility is brewing among the city states, Denver, Texarkana, and Monterey, that have risen out of the former American nation. So again, it's Denver and the high ground, because that's where um what is it, 12 districts in Hunger Games, and there's what's the name of the city where all the elites live? Somebody will tell me this. What's the name of the city where President Snow and all them live in and it's Skittles Clown World, right, in the Hunger Games. Um Forget the name of it. What's the damn name of the city, y'all? I got too much here. But it's basically, Denver. You can tell in the novel that it's Denver. Or that it's, Colorado, or at least the sort of mountain region. Hostility is brewing among the city states, the former American nation. A prominent scientist named Thontadio, a latter-day Newton or Einstein, visits the monastery to investigate its holdings. He is astonished to find that one of the monks has created a working electric light, which is powered with a sort of treadmill. Thaddeus believes that Leibowitz memorabilia will lead him to breakthroughs of his work, but the abbot refuses to let Taddeo take items from the library back to Texarkana. Meanwhile, the abbey narrowly avoids being used as a military base for an attack on Denver. The final part, Fiat Voluntas Tua, it means let thy will be done, describes the beginning of another nuclear war, this time between the world's two dominant powers, the Atlantic Confederacy and the Asian Coalition. So that's kind of 1984-esque, right? With Airstrip 1 and then Oceania and all that. But that's three global balkanized regions. This is two. But of course, it's Asian. It's it's East versus West, right? Um, it is the year 3781, and civilization has not only recovered but has developed beyond the level it was at in the mid 20th century. Nation states once again have nuclear arsenals. Space travel between Earth and distant colonies has become common. There's even a communication device in the Abbey. It's a combination of Google Translate and Google Voice, like Alexa. As the war begins, the abbot, Dom Zerke, instructs a group of monks to flee the Earth for a colony near Alpha Centauri. Pan M, thank you. Thank you. Nom de plume. That 4.99 and says Pan M. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, you are correct. Thank you for reminding me. They take the Leibowitz memorabilia. After they depart, the abbey, which has stood for nearly 2,000 years, is demolished by an atomic bomb. The abbot is crushed in the ruins. The final passages of the book are an eerie imagining of the earth without mankind. A wind came across the ocean, sweeping with it a pall of fine white ash. The ash fell into the sea and into the breakers. The breakers washed dead shrimp ashore with the driftwood. Then they washed up the whiting. Shark swam out to his deepest waters and brooded in the old clean currents. He was very hungry that season. It's an excellent ending to the book. Um, and a moldy. That's a good idea. That's a good idea with Sam Hyde, with Jason Goldstriker as the villain. Yeah, and so it's a great ending to the book, and it actually reminded me of Ted Hughes. And what's the poem? It's in Crow, with the white shark dove into the sea. Yes, Toledo. Yes, you need to catch up on Sam Hyde. Fish Tank is wild. That Fish Tank is going to get wilder. And did Frank Hassel show up yet on Fish Tank? I know that they were talking about that, but I don't know if he did because I missed it. That when it got shut down, the website got shut down. And they were just doing the live streams on YouTube. But I know the website is still up, fishtank.live. But I missed it whether Frank showed up or not. So I hope Frank Hassel shows up because I haven't kept up with his content on Gumroad. I don't know if he's been putting out content, but Frank Hassel is classic. And you guys, if you haven't seen it, one of the classic things especially from 2020 is Frank Hassel and Peachy Rider at the Atlanta riot. Oh my gosh. It's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Because Frank Hassel. Remember when JD met Frank Hassel in Atlanta? And when he was down there with AJ. And I just love that Frank Hassel wears a GoPro on his forehead and he goes into the grocery store and everyone you remember when he's he's Don Wario, and everybody he meets, they go, "Are you filming me?" And he goes, "No, it's my insulin pump." He wears this fucking snake around his neck. Frank Hassel is awesome. Anyway, he's got that tattoo on his arm. It says "Credible Threat." So anyway, yeah, I don't know if he showed up or not, but yeah, you got to keep up on the Sam Hyde content. So let's see. Yeah, also around that time, that was August 2020. That's when JD interviewed Sam on IW, right, on Papa's channel, 4th Hour. That's honestly, just objectively speaking, that is one of the great. That's our interview. That's one of the great interviews for us, for our people. That was especially watching it live. That was amazing. So yeah, you got to check that out. Jay's interview with Sam Hyde. So yes, Death Row knows. Remember the GoFundMe, Jethro? I can't say what it was for, but yeah. That was anyway. This says every generation conjures its own apocalypses and dystopias. I know I'm rambling on, but I'm having fun, and so thanks for being with me. We got 47 live with us. That's awesome. Thank you all for being here. And I saw I saw that Kristen put up that the Kubrick clip. Shouts out to Kristen, Slow Boy Whiteboard, and some of the comments, dude. Somebody said something like, "I'm tired of these Kubrick exposés." It's like, fucking dude, flip it. Whoever thought that I ever did an expose? The fuck? I'm sitting there just babbling, having fun, talking about Kubrick. It's the internet. Like you just change. You can just go to an infinite number of other places if you didn't like it, right? Rather than leaving some fucking comment that I'm not going to use the particular language I want to use, but like, well, dude, fuck is wrong with these people? Anyway, um, but thanks for posting that, Kristen. That was funny. Yeah, I was just sitting there talking about Stanley Kubrick, and babbling on. I know it takes a long time to get to the point sometimes. I know that, but that's we're talking about art and literature. We have all this time. It's the internet, or whatever. Every generation conjures its own apocalypses and dystopias. They give us an index of the collective anxieties of the era. In the decades before the First World War, invasion stories such as H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds populated the bestseller lists in Britain and the United States. Yevgeny Zamyatin's We should do that book. We need to do that. If you want me to do that, please drop a sponsor stream. I will do that book. And George Orwell's 1984, we did Animal Farm, were fueled by widespread fears of authoritarian governments during the first half of the 20th century. Post-war American science fiction is overflowing with thinly disguised freakouts about communism and nuclear Armageddon. More recently, we've seen a plethora of books that fret about economic collapse, the spread of infectious diseases, and the destruction of the environment. Um, Colson Whitehead's, um, yeah, in the like one of the slow boys was like, I'm tired of all these people with books in the background. So I only need one book. It's like, motherfucker, you don't have a single book. Don't act like you only need one book. You're sitting there, you're on Minecraft, dude. Don't fucking lie. Bitch ass. Anyway, uh, they were fueled by widespread fears of authoritarian governments during the first half of the 20th century. Post-war American science fiction is overflowing with thinly disguised freakouts about communism. Colson Whitehead's Zone 1, Karen Thompson Walker's Age of Miracles, Jeff Vandermeer's Southern Reach trilogy, Eden Lafuki's California, I don't know that book, and Emily St. John Mandel's Station 11 are all part of this wave. Looming is Juno Diaz's work in progress, which combines alien invasion with viral illness and an overheated planet. That's now. That's the now thing, right? Part of the novel was published in the short story Monstro in the New Yorker in 2012. I need to read that. I need to read Diaz, and I just randomly thought of this. So we need to do Robert Penn Warren, All the King's Men. I need to. That would be a good one to do. We need to do some Southern literature, some more Southern literature. A Canticle for Liebowitz sits squarely at the heart of the subgenre of novels about nuclear holocaust. Miller's preferred term was mega war. The Zone. The subject was enough of an obsession for Miller that he later edited with Martin Greenberg an anthology called Beyond Armageddon, which featured post-apocalyptic tales by Brad Bury, Clark, Harland Ellison, J.G. Ballard. We did the book Cocaine Nights, J.G. Ballard, and many others. In his introduction to the collection, Miller noted that the stories shared a nostalgia for things that had been lost. Post-mega-war stories are about an afterlife. Miller wrote, survivors don't really live in such a world, they haunt it. Yeah, interesting because I mean, there is one thing to be said for all of the people, one thing that's common for all these works, and that is that they do exist in they do exist as kind of specters that haunt this landscape, almost like I don't know. This is kind of a poetic interpretation, I guess, probably, but like uh, if you imagine There are scenes in the Book of Eli, which I'm gonna get to shortly. I promise. In the Book of Eli, where I haven't done Werner Herzog. Where Eli is wandering through the desert, and of course, necessarily, you're going to have the heat wave and the mirage, but it serves to kind of, um, it's almost like the view of the character, the way your perspective. Like in Lawrence of Arabia, you at the beginning of Lawrence of Arabia, there's the famous shot of Lawrence from so far away. It's not Lawrence. Is it Lawrence at the beginning? No, it's the other guy, and he's coming. He's in the center of the screen, right, and he's approaching the camera view, and because it's so far off, you can't tell. You're supposed to, as a viewer, you're in the location, and you can't tell because it's at the well whether this is a mirage or not. And so, a human figure in the desert like starts to kind of fluctuate, like wave, and it's ghost like. It's like a spectral haunt. So in a way, that's crazy because that becomes the reality for the survivors of the radiation war and the fallout, right? They like barely subsist. They're alone, right? The solos in A Boy and His Dog, and they like haunt the desert, right? Um, so so that's pretty insightful. Um, Within the cathedral of post-apocalyptic, no, hold on. Let's see. Beyond being a repository for his fears about the bomb, Mechanical for Leibowitz was a means for Miller to work through the trauma and guilt that haunted him from his wartime experiences, especially the bombing of the Abbey at Monte Cassino. By his own admission, Miller did not become fully aware of the driving force behind his novel until he was working on its third part. Quote, I was writing the first version of the scene where Zerke lies half buried in the rubble. Then a light bulb came on over my head. Good God. Is this the Abbey at Monte Cassino? What have I been writing? Whoa, that's intense. Because I know that he suffered as a result of bombing this abbey, right? And that haunted him. That haunted him on the interior, like his for the rest of his life, just like his characters are haunted in the exterior, wandering the wasteland of a bombing. So that's what he writing it had been doing. But none of that is necessary to know about the novel. I think this is just sort of insightful. Um and night, Kristen. And let's see. Within the cathedral, I mean, he only wrote one book, published one book during his lifetime. Within the cathedral of post-apocalyptic and dystopian literature, there ought to be a small sanctum reserved for books produced out of the author's personal experience with cataclysmic events. Other works that fit into this niche include Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, which was inspired by the writer having witnessed the firebombing of Dresden, and The Forever War. That's what coined it. Joe Haldeman's 1974 novel, which drew directly on his tour of duty in Vietnam. I think that probably in the common parlance, most people think that's a Julian Assange phrase, the forever war. I'm sure people think that. I mean, probably why wouldn't you? But it is Haldeman, the forever war. A lesser case can also be made for Neville Shute's On the Beach, which was published 2 years before Canticle. Shute was an engineer who worked for the Royal Navy Directorate of Miscellaneous Weapons Development during the Second World War. He later covered the Normandy landings as a writer for the Ministry of Defense. That's crazy. That's what happens in Saving Private Ryan. Remember, one of the characters is a journalist, the coward character, of course. I think that was probably an unintentional truth that came out of that. A second link between these works by Miller, Vonnegut, and Haldeman is humor. While a post-apocalyptic novel set in a monastery may not strike most readers as the terrain for comedy, Canticle for Leibowitz is a surprisingly funny book in small ways and large. Even Miller's basic premise that the church, like a cockroach, cannot be killed by nuclear war made me chuckle throughout. Miller proves himself a dab hand at slapstick. Francis, the protagonist of Fiat Homo, is a hapless one, as hapless as one of the Three Stooges, and Fontadio, the brilliant scientist in Fiat Lux, is stuffed shirt, academician who would be at home in a David Lodge novel. I don't know David Lodge. In the Canon for Leibowitz, the knowledge that the monks faithfully preserved ultimately contributes to the obliteration of the world. Yeah, that's one of the ironies in the book, because they find the memorabilia from Leibowitz, and it's for an electric light, right? So then they kind of work on this windmill, this quixotic windmill, really, I guess. Speaking of Don Quixote earlier, and excuse me, and they create this like windmill, almost like a Rube Goldberg machine, I guess. Like it's all these monks working on this machine that creates one light. So fiat lux, let there be light. But in this part, what happens is, and this is kind of enlightened. This is why it's supposed to be a mirror of the Enlightenment. They create the Enlightenment. They spark an Enlightenment, which then leads, of course, to weapons manufacturing, which then leads to a recreation of the thing that destroyed them in the first place, which would be the nuclear war. Does that make sense? So that's one of the ironies of the book. Um, let's see. I'm gonna skip the rest of that, and I'm gonna go briefly into some of the parts of the text here. Yes, again, like and share, please. Thank you, and thanks for dropping that Cash App link, Jethro. I'll get to the super chats, the direct super chats at the end of the stream. Please think about considering donating to me. I need some of that big money out there, people. Please, I'm serious. I really need it. I gotta. We all need money. I need you to donate to me. Thank you so much. For those who support me, really appreciate you. Let's see. It says, let me give you the first part of the book here, because again, we're going to talk about the opening of the book, like we always do. It says, Brother Francis Girard of Utah might never have discovered the blessed documents had it not been for the pilgrims with girded loins who appeared during that young novice's Lenten fast in the desert. Never before had Brother Francis actually seen a pilgrim with girded loins, but that was one of the bona fide that but that this one was the bona fide article. He was convinced as soon as he had recovered from the spine-chilling effect of the pilgrim's advent on the far horizon, like Lawrence of Arabia, as a wiggling iota of black caught in a shimmering haze of heat. Beautiful sentence. Legless, but wearing a tiny head, the iota materialized out of the mirror glaze on the broken roadway and seemed more to writhe than to walk into view, causing Brother Francis to clutch the crucifix of his rosary and mutter an ave or two. The iota suggested a tiny apparition spawned by the heat demons who torture the land at high noon, when any creature capable of motion on the desert, except the buzzards and a few monastic hermits such as Francis, lay motionless in its burrow or hid beneath a rock from the ferocity of the sun. Only a thing monstrous, a thing preternatural, or a thing with addled wits would hike purposefully down the trail at noon this way. It's beautiful writing. Let me get to a specific section here. Chapter 16 is probably the crux of the novel, and this is because of the conversation between Benjamin and the poet. And I don't want to go too much more into this because we've been going 2.5 hours, and I want to get into Book of Eli. But what happens is that Benjamin, who is obviously supposed to be like the lost tribe of Benjamin, and he's one of these guys who survived, has a conversation with this poet who is he is supposed to appear as an idiot, right? He's a fool. But that means that he's the classic fool, which means that he's a wise fool. He's sophomoric, but um he is like he's obviously supposed to be he's Miller is alluding to King Lear here on an obvious level, in the sense that the fool in King Lear, we did a King Lear stream. That's one of the streams I don't know if I'm most proud of it, but I like what we did with King Lear, because it's a massive work, and I think we, did a pretty good analysis of that. And the crux of King Lear is obviously King Lear wandering on the heath with the fool, because the fool speaks the truth to him, right? And they have an inverted relationship. King Lear becomes the fool, and the fool essentially rules King Lear, where King Lear is ruled by his base passions on the heath. The fool is ruled by logic. So, so I've mentioned before how that's one of the great things that Shakespeare and the great writers understand, and Miller understands this too, about language, is that the humor, and especially the use of the pun, is something that is elevated. We should elevate way above. Um, it's on a higher level of language than even typical Shakespearean verse, because you consider what humor does. Not only just what it does to the emotions and to the passions, but what it does to the soul, and what it does. I mean, even what it does on a biological level, right? Um, and uplifts your spirit and the heart. And puns are especially important because the ability to use language on both an intuitive and sort of psycho spiritual level is is not common, right? It's something that it's very difficult for people to do. It's very difficult for people to that's why. Okay, how can I say this? That's why when you see something funny, when you see a funny clip, especially of a comic, and you share it with somebody, often the people that you share it with did not find it funny. And that's not to say anything about those people, but oftentimes, I mean, humor is very personal, right? And oftentimes people mistake humor for some sort of weakness, and that is a sign of a that's just low IQ, right? Um, have I ever done a stream on American Gods by Neil Gaiman? Interesting mix of mythology. No, I haven't. And actually, speaking of mythology, we should just do Edith Hamilton's mythology at some point. Probably cover mythology when we do the Iliad and the Odyssey, but we need to do those. So Shakespeare understands this. Again, I know I go to Macbeth in every stream because it's my favorite play. It's one of my favorite works. But um, you look at the porter scene, and how that functions in the play, and how he speaks to Macduff, and that's kind of all you need to know, right? So he has this conversation with the poet, and that's not to say that the poet in this has the truth, but it means that their conversation is elevated above the rest of this, right? Um, and you guys, what were you guys talking about? Black Swan. Try not to read the chat here, of course. But JC Owen says, if you feel too manly for ballet, then take sword fighting classes. Same thing. Well, it's a good point. Just as a side note, I will say that probably people are unaware that especially stage combat or classical actual combat, is based in and mirrors dancing. And it is almost a ballet. I mean, boxing in a way is a dance, right? It's a kind of dance, not a skills dance. It's a dance in the sense that, um, and my teacher mentioned this last week. He was talking about how Hemingway, Joyce Carol Oates, um, she has a short story about boxing, and she was talking about how Ernest Hemingway has a complete misunderstanding of boxing. I agree and disagree with that. I think that her understanding of Ernest Hemingway's understanding is probably a little off, but but Hemingway did think that boxing basically represents is a brutalistic sport where you pummel the other person. Now, that's also not. It's more complex and nuanced than that, because obviously Hemingway has a. We're supposed to read into Hemingway that boxing is analogous to bullfighting, and bullfighting is obviously like a dance. It's almost like a ballet. I can say that from personal experience watching, I talked about it, the Plaza de Toros, watching Javier Vasquez do that in his bullfight. And that, I mean, that was as close. I've seen a lot of ballet, but that's as close to a real time, non choreographed dance as anything I've ever seen. It was beautiful. It was terrible and beautiful. And boxing is like that because boxing is actually, I like watch Mike Tyson video. That's like my thing on Instagram is just watching Mike Tyson videos. Um, and and Tyson is a kind of keeper of the encyclopedia of boxing because he knows everything about what boxing is. He's not just the great boxer, but he knows everything about what the boxers themselves and what they've always done and how they move. And one thing that you can see when you watch Iron Mike is that um, when two guys are fighting, it's not a street fight where everybody's just it's chaotic. It's when one guy moves, um, he has to keep in mind the counter move. So if you're gonna throw a left hook, then you have to block and know where to react simultaneously. Think how difficult that is. That's I mean, everything in life is kind of like that. I mean, verse is like that. Iambic pentameter is like that. The iamb is like that. The up and down, or the EKG, or the waves, right? Or the tie. Everything's up and down, left, move and counter move, right? But playing pool is like that, right? You not only aim for the ball you want to go into the pocket, but you have to be aware of where the ball is going to land for your next move, or as a defensive move, so you don't give it to your opponent. And boxing is like that, but it's visceral and and corporeal, like all mixed into one. That is like that is takes a higher intelligence than the most I think a lot of people would understand, because you have to incorporate what you know in your mind with what your body is doing, like on an almost for one, on an almost scientific level, but on the other as kind of a choreographic sense. So yeah, so dancing and especially sword fighting are like that. I mean, sword fight, especially fighting, stage combat, and sword fighting. Even the terms used are dance terms, um, and that's that's one of the things that occurs in chapter 16 of this book, is that the conversation between the poet and Benjamin is a type of batonage, as Norm Macdonald says, a give and take, where I mean, that's what a debate is, right? Two people, um, having to be aware that everything that they say has to be grounded, and based in an evidence that they are going to explain, while the other person being aware of what the other person is going to say. Right? That's any argumentation, not just debating, but like any kind of written argumentation, right? So that's not to say the poet is right in this. It just that's what he said. He says on page 135. He says uh he says, "I brought you back your prodigal, Benjamin," said Dom Paulo. He tugged at a leash, and the blue-headed goat trotted up from behind the pony. It bleated and strained at the rope from seeing the hermit, and I thought I'd pay you a visit. The animal is the poet's, the hermit grunted. He won it fairly in a game of chance, although he cheated miserably. That's clever, right? That's Tony Montana. I always tell the truth, even when I lie. Take it back to him and let me counsel you against meddling in worldly swindles that don't concern you. Good day. He turned toward the arroyo. Wait, Benjamin, I'll give it to a peasant I won't have it wandering around the abbey and bleeding into the church. I'm not a goat, the hermit said crossly. It's the beast which your prophet saw, and it was made for a woman to ride. It suggests you curse it and drive it into the desert. You notice, however, that it divideth the hoof and cheweth the cud. He started away again. The abbot's smile faded. Um, what he says here, he talks about being older than Methuselah. On page 137, the poet certainly would never believe that the venerable Francis met a saint. That would be a superstition. The poet would rather believe he met you 6 centuries ago. A purely natural explanation. Eh? Benjamin chuckled wryly. It's hard for me to read the text because I marked over it. But on chapter 7, in chapter 17, I tell you definitely there will be a war, said the messenger from New Rome. And they know that there's an oncoming war which they can predict because they keep recreating their cycle of history. And so the last thing I'll say is, there's the radiation sickness that occurs in chapter 28. And this was great. Page 271. There's a character named Jeth, by the way. You've seen people die, Jeth. Seen many people die. It looks easy. They taper off, and then there's a little spasm, and it's over. That inky dark gulf between Aham and Asti, blackest Styx, abyss between Lord and man. Listen, Jeth, you really believe there's something on the other side, don't you? Then why are you shaking so? A verse from the Dies Irae drifted into mind, and it nagged in him. What am I? Who am wretched than to say? Whom shall I ask to be my protector, since even the just man is scarcely saved? Why scarcely saved? Surely he would not damn the just. Then why are you shaking so? The way the book ends is the guy, there's a woman, and what happens? She's holding the ciborium with the Eucharist in it, and she demands that he give her child the Eucharist. He won't. He ends up getting stabbed, I think, and then she administers it to him in his last rites. But what that's to say is that this is crazy because the mutant world sort of takes over in the end, and I see a lot of references in this, or what we can see is Latter Day references to number one, the road and Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, and the language in this is like even the environment is close to Cormac McCarthy with the arroyo and the sort of western landscape. By the way, we're gonna do The Crossing next by Cormac McCarthy, part of his Border trilogy. I'll do All the Pretty Horses later, even though that's the first book in the trilogy. So anyway, and the book finally ends um with the bombs and tantrums they don't forgive. It finally ends with the white shark falling back into the sea. So what happens is Lucifer falls again. It's the bomb. The monks escape off world, and then the fish, um, in a sort of neo plague, go back onto the shores dead, and life is wiped out. But in the abyss of the ocean, the white shark plummets into the sea and escapes the nuclear fallout. And that's a deep image because obviously goes into the depths of the ocean, but also the predator survives, but life survives. But there's a weird Gnostic element there, which I read it. It's Ted Hughes in his book Crow, uh, because that's mentioned in poem. What is it? Crow's First Lesson. It's called Crow's First Lesson. So that's all I'm going to say about the Canticle for Liebowitz. And then finally, let's just end this with um, an analysis of Book of Eli. Book of Eli is, I know this is a lot to cover in one stream, but we haven't done this for a week. So there's a lot to talk about with the Book of Eli. And actually, I mentioned this to DPH, our homeboy, David Patrick Harry, the Eternal Logos. And I said, I'll make one suggestion for a film in the future, and that's the Book of Eli, because I think that and I'll do if we do that, I'll do a full analysis of this film with him. I haven't done Umberto Eco, but you know what? I probably should do The Name of the Rose, because that's the second time that Eco has come up to me in a week. Ruckus brought it up. Ruckus from Boiler Room and Alternate Current Radio. Shouts out to Ruckus. Brought it up the other day that he was reading a book by Umberto Eco. So maybe I need to do The Name of the Rose. At least just the film. I can do that. It's a great film. Sean Connery, Christian Slater's first movie, but I need to do that. So again, I'm going to get to the super chats at the end of this, and I'll do kind of let's see, we've been going 2 hours and 45 minutes. So I'll try to make this as succinct as possible, you guys. Need to chug my Red Bull here. Man. Oh, getting getting kind of parched with y'all. So, Book of Eli. The Book of Eli is a 2010 film. Thank you, Evan. Appreciate it. By the Hughes brothers. And what I'll just say, first off, shouts out to TZ out there. The Hughes brothers made a film that is really incredible. I think this movie is incredible because it is explicitly Christian. At least that's the way that I see it. I don't see how you can watch the movie and not, get that from it. What happens in the book. I mean, it's an incredible movie, and it's a hopeful movie, and it's positive. Because what's happened in the film is that there's we know right away from the opening shot that there's been complete fallout, because we see a hellscape of dust and sort of it's almost a dark green, like nuclear vision of a forest where there are still trees and stuff. So it's not the road. It's not McCarthy's The Road, but but we see like nothing, and then we see we see carcasses of people, and then we see this cat, and it's wild that we see cat, because the cat is the domesticated cat, but it's furless, right? So what I assume from watching the movie is that the cat symbolizes the return to the wild of the feline, because everybody's been returned to the wild, where we get an exterior shot, and then its hair's been burned off because of the fallout. And so the cat is kind of walking, through the wilderness, and finds this body of a dead man and starts eating it. And we kind of pan over, and then we see a gas mask, and then we see that there's a guy sitting there, and he's sitting there with a bow and arrow, but it's like he's doing it with his legs, and it's horizontal, and he's got both hands. So he releases the arrow with two hands, and he kills the cat. And so now we know that in the future, in this place, all there is to eat is hairless cat that's been eating a man. Okay, well, that's what's happening, right? Well, so then we see Denzel, right? So it's Denzel Washington, and Denzel, he's like wandering, and he's on this road, and then he finds this shack, and he goes in this shack, and he kind of camps out for the night, and he cooks up the cat meat, and he turns on an iPod, which is interesting. And he charges it with like a battery that he's found. He 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 cleans himself with like KFC wet naps. So it's the kind of garbage that is meant to survive, right? Um, and that's all he has. And he's got these like little pieces of Canicle for Leibowitz memorabilia around him. And then he starts sharpening his gladio machete. It's a kind of gladio. It's like a short sword, but it's a machete. There are holes drilled in it in the blade. And so what I read from that is a couple things. I mean, this is very small, but what I read from that is that um number one, it's aerodynamic, and so he's obviously, this guy knows what he's doing, and he's sharpening it with a whetstone, so he's a warrior, and that it's made for maneuverability and for quick movement and lethality, right? But also that the holes are kind of eye holes, and you won't get this till after you watch the whole film, but there's something about his eyes, okay? And so anyway, he's got a place, and he eats his meat or whatever, but also, a mouse crawls out of the shack wall, and he feeds this mouse, and he says, "Come on, you gotta take it," and he gives the cat meat to the mouse, and he kinda makes a little comment about, like, it's like a reversal of Tom and Jerry, right? But we know this is a good guy. This is a kind man. He also found a closet. He opened it up, and there was a guy hanging in the closet. Dead guy hanging in the closet. You know where you are right away watching the movie. If you didn't know anything about it, you would know exactly what's going on. You can because of the sort of signpost in the theme. So then he's wandering, and we notice that he's on the road, right? And he walks amongst these cars, and then there's this woman. There's a there's an e-girl, art gotho with a, uh, a grocery store cart, like, in the middle of the road, and she's saying, "Can you help me? Can you help me?" You know right away that this biatch, has set a trap for him, he knows it. So he says, he kinda sniffs the air, right, which is like, Ezra Pound, like the hounds riding on the sniff of air. Um, and he says that he can smell raiders or whatever they are from a mile off. Um, and then like the walls, kind of these like weird steel things fall down, and a bunch of Cormac McCarthy roadster cannibalistic dystopian renegades, but the bad kind, the bad batch shows up on the road, and they say, "Okay," and they got their teeth all gnarly. And we know that they have set a trap, and they intend to kill him. And one of the guys says, "Just give me all your shit," or whatever. And he puts his hand on Denzel. And it's funny because I don't know about you guys, but when I'm watching the movie, when he did that, my first thought was, better not put your hands on him. Don't put your hand on my man's Denzel. And Denzel says, he says something like, "I don't know, but if you put your hand again on me again, you're gonna lose it." And I'm like, "See, I know my man." And the guy reaches out again, and bam! Uh, Man, he wields that gladio faster than anything, and it's cool because he keeps it inside of his jacket, and it's like he's like a samurai. And this guy's hand just bam, just slices off, right? So he gives his right hand, and he's in shock. And it's cool because then Denzel, what he does is he's wearing shades, by the way. He's wearing I'll show you a picture. He's wearing sunglasses like almost the whole film. And it's cool because it's not just like some costumed oftentimes the costumier plays a really vital role in cinema because again, like the appearance, this is like form plus content equals meaning in literature. The appearance of the film, the way that it looks visually and the way that the characters are dressed has to um, carry the inner life of the story, right? So we have to determine who this character is on the inside. What are his motivations and his worldview? What's he about? What does he do? What purpose does he serve? What can we read about him from what he looks like on the outside? So you notice that even in this picture, like everything that he has is a kind of a grainy desert, like faded. You can tell it's like almost a faded green. There's a kind of a green, the weird green. Um, and but it becomes like almost sandy, and it's a kind of camouflage. But it's also because the what I read into it is that like is the nuclear cloud of toxicity has left this kind of green vapor cloud on the globe. And he's wearing those sunglasses. I mean, he looks cool, but he's wearing the sunglasses for a couple of reasons. One is they all got to wear sunglasses outside because everything's irradiated. And what we're going to learn, um, well, I don't want to, it's not that I don't want to spoil what happens in the movie, but this movie does something that not a lot of films do, um, which is it has a twist ending that is not only expensive in the sense that it's not cheap. It's not cheap. It's it's a revelation. It's it makes the whole thing make sense in a really powerful way. So I'll get to that because I think it's important that we get to that because our like journey along the analysis of the film kind of mirrors his journey and what he's doing in both a literal and a subtextual sense, in a figurative sense, and on a spiritual and on an explicitly religious level. So um, what he does is he's out in the light, but he backs up into the darkness underneath this bridge. And so yeah, the characters can't really see him. Um, but he's using the darkness to his advantage, right? Um, oh, oh, you thought that you were in charge. Oh, you thought the darkness was your friend. You thought the darkness was your friend. You merely adapted to it. I was born in it, craved by it. I did not see the light in it was blinding. That's true in this movie. So he backs up into the darkness and he kills all these dudes. He leaves the e-girl goth art hoe, um, uh, carton art on the road, and he takes off. And eventually, he makes his way to Bartertown. I'll speed it up here. He makes his way to Bartertown, and when he gets in there, he goes inside, and the bartender is Tom Waits, Renfield from Dracula. He makes his deals or whatever. Tom Waits says to him, you can sit here while I value all this stuff, and they barter, and um, he says, Denzel says, no, I don't mean that, but I got cat oil. Cat oil's good, and and he says, yeah, go on over to the saloon basically and wait, and he says, no, I'm gonna wait here. Well, he eventually does go over there, and then he gets confronted by one of the dudes from Jarhead. And then what happens is he takes out a bunch of the guys downstairs in the saloon, and Gary Oldman is the warlord, and he comes out from upstairs and looks down, and he sees him, and then he invites him up to his office. He's got kind of a mid-century, nice little office upstairs with Jennifer Beals from Flashdance as his blind servant wife woman. And he uses her to manipulate Mila Kunis, who is the um, innocent figure in this, and who ends up as a kind of, I suppose it's a kind of a biblical allegory. It's almost like she's like a Mary Magdalene figure because she is like hoed out by Gary Oldman. Remember that Norm Macdonald joke? This Gary Oldman is a young man Any young man is an old man. Gary Mann is just some guy who works over at Comedy Central. So anyway, Gary Oldman comes out and he says, "Look, you just took out all of my my little cannibal slaves downstairs. How about you come work for me? I could use a MK Delta like you, homeboy, like you. Let's work for me." And Denzel's like, "I'm all right. I'm going to be on my way." And he says, "Why don't you stay for the night and think about it? It's not a request." So they lock him up in this room. Also, his number one, his right hand man is uh what's his name? I can't remember his name here. Oh, now I gotta look it up. What's his name? Um Big tall guy in English, but he went to my drama school. Give me a second. I gotta look up his name because I can't remember it. But he was at drama school about 10 years before me. Ray Stevenson. Ray Stevenson, that's it. So Ray Stevenson puts him in that room, and then they try to manipulate him because they send in Jennifer Beals, and she says, "Here, have a hot meal and some, we have actual like water." And and Denzel, you again, you're thinking like you better test that food and that water, and that's what he does. And then they send in Mila Kunis, right? Baba no Yuki Chacha Mila Kunis. They send in Mila Kunis, and she's like, "Look, I'm here to be your skeezer for the night." And Denzel's like, "Look, I'm not I'm not here to take advantage of some hoe or whatever." And they get to talking, and she basically says like, "Well, please just let me stay in here for the night because if you send me back before that, he's going to torture my mom. Gary Oldman is going to torture Jennifer Beals. So just let me chill." So while she's chilling in the room, she looks and he's hidden something under his bed. Well, he's got a book. Okay, he's got a book. And we noticed that earlier on in the bar scene, he quoted Denzel when the guys are about to attack him. He quoted the Bible, and Gary Oldman heard this, and he quoted Genesis. I think it's Genesis, where Cain and Abel are talking, and he quotes Genesis, and Gary Oldman, pricks up his ears, which, by the way, is not a Gary Oldman film, and so Mila Kunis sees this, and she sees his Bible. So she goes back the next day, and she tells Gary Oldman, "Look, he's got a book." And he says, "What's the book?" And she says, "I don't know, but it's a big leather bound volume, and it's dusty, and he hid it somewhere." And he says, "What does it look like?" And she says, "It's got a lock on it, and it's got some sort of symbol on the front." And Gary Oldman says, "What's the symbol?" And she goes like this. And so we get right away that Gary Oldman wants this book because he knows it's a Bible. He comes from the old times. He's an old timer from pre-war, like Denzel. Now, Gary Oldman is the warlord, but he is the warlord because he has the most valuable thing, which is books. This is great. You can tell us why my movie, right? He collects books. Everything's gone. Everything's been wasted. All the pages have been burned up in the nuclear fire, but he's managed to keep some books. But he's looking for the most valuable thing in the world, which is the Bible. This is a great movie. He wants this Bible. So the next day, there's a kind of a man with no name scene. Again, there's guys with a man with kind of rifles pointing at him, and they come out and they sort of have their phalanx. And Gary Oldman says, "Look, I want you to stay and work for me, but there's one thing I want more than anything, and that's that book you got." And Denzel says, "You don't want this." Um, and Gary Oldman's like, "I want this Bible. Uh, you know what it means." Denzel says, "Why do you want it? What does it mean to you?" And he says, it's interesting because Gary Oldman's the villain, but he says, "I'm trying to start something here, a civilization. And the only thing, even though he's the bad guy, he says, the only thing that's going to give us a new world, that's going to give us any kind of return to civilization is that book." because everything's written down, everything's codified. It's all in that book, and it gives all these people a system for the way the world is supposed to be. It's the way it was before all this, and it's the way it's gonna be. It's all right there. And Denzel, like, this is an interesting thing because, and this is also occurs in Canticle for Leibowitz, especially in chapter 16, because and at the end, because Gary Oldman is willing to take a life for the Bible, right? And Denzel, you're wondering, like, if Denzel is this righteous guy, he has a chance here to be part of this thing and to create this thing and to do the very thing that he wants to do, obviously, right? Which is make to make a new world and to let people live by the word. But he says to him, I'm on a mission. I'm making my way west, and I'm taking it to a place where I know it'll be in good hands. And eventually what you want will happen, but this isn't the place to do it. And you're not that guy. You're not that guy, pal. You're not that guy. Right. And so he fights, he escapes, he gets away. Gary Oldman can't get it. Okay, so here's what happens in the movie. Um, so he takes Mila Kunis with him. She escapes. So now it's Eli. Now, of course, Eli, and we have Eli. We have the biblical Eli, but also he's in the wilderness. He's being attacked and tempted. But Eli, this guy is with God. L. Remember, Jamie's pointed this out so astutely so many times. Shouts out to Jamie. 11, right, in Stranger Things, she's supposed to be some sort of demigod, but this guy is the guy who is of God. He's carrying this book, and he takes his Bible, and he finally. So what happens is finally, Gary Oldman gets the Bible, right, and Denzel gets wounded. You think you know it looks like a mortal wound, but they make their way west, and they get all the way to San Francisco. And they show the bridge that is they show the Golden Gate Bridge, which is broken in the middle. So what we get from that is we have a bridge, we've got an abyss, we got the abyss of the bay underneath, and the bridge is broken, which shows that humanity is broken, and we need to get across this bridge, cross the abyss, in order to get uh to get to sanctuary. And they get there, they get in a boat, and they row out there, and that's also interesting because it's Denzel is rowing the boat, even though he's wounded. I don't know, it's almost like he's carrying the ark, right? He's carrying the word over the water, and there's something in there also in the imagery about he's not walking on water, but, um, but he is gonna be a kind of savior, right? Kind of savior. And so they row out to this was cool. They row out to Alcatraz, and when they get up there, um, they're at the rock, and they get, who are you? What's your business? Right? Who goes there? And there's a bunch of um, Eric Prince dudes up there, a bunch of Blackwater guys who are neatly dressed and put together in uniform and they got weapons and they got a system. And he says, I got a copy of the King James Bible. So they let him in. And this is cool because this is a post-apocalyptic dystopia. We've covered Clockwork Orange. And who's the kindly old man? Who's the keeper? Who's the keeper of the old stuff up there? Who's the old wizard up there? It's Malcolm McDowell, right? From Clockwork Orange. And he says, look, so you said you've got a copy of the Bible. Would you mind showing it to me? And he says, I will. But we know at this point Denzel doesn't have the Bible anymore because Gary Oldman's got it. Okay, so Gary Oldman gets Tom Waits to unlock the Bible, and here's the big reveal: the Bible, and he opens it. They're blank pages. So Gary Oldman, no, right? And it turns out that Jennifer Beals, being blind, um, what you read into this is that she knows what's written in the pages because it's Braille. And she tells him, I'm not going to help you. Right. And so all this time he's been using her and she's his slave, but now he's going to be her slave. And then what happens is Denzel says, "Get a piece of paper." Oh, this is so cool. And if you know, I'm not trying to just recount the movie. I know if you've seen the movie, you know this. But even having seen this movie a bunch of times, it always like is surprising to me when this part comes along. You get sucked into the movie in a thing where you're living like in the movie along with the movie, right? And he says, "Get a bunch of pieces of paper and a pen." So Malcolm, they sit down at this table, and Malcolm McDowell got the pen in his hand, and Malcolm McDowell is the keeper of all the old things at Alcatraz, and it's cool because it's a rock, right? It's the rock, and the Lord is my rock, right? On which they're going to build their new world, and they're on the rock. And he's got all this stuff at Alcatraz. The prison is still there, but now, the way it looks, but it's like books. It's all books, and there's music. There's and it's all clean. There's people living there, and he says, Denzel says to him, "Listen to me carefully. I want you to write down every word that I say exactly as I say it." And he starts within the beginning, right? And Genesis, book 1, verse 1. Dude, the guy has memorized the entire Bible, right? And we know that because, man, I gotta say this. I gotta say this. Like, when he starts reciting Genesis, when I'm watching this, like, I mean, this is one of those movies where I was watching it and, you know, I guess maybe you try to be, not get like sucked into the emotion of a film, of a Hollywood film. But this is one of those movies where I'm watching it and like I can feel my my heart like squeezes up real tight, you know. You gotta try not to shed tears when you're watching this. It is awesome. Um because just the fact that he starts saying the words. Just I mean, even the fact that he's like the movie it's a Hollywood movie and he's this is about he was reciting the words in the Bible um and so then we see sort of a time lapse and it's complete and the end of the movie is they are they got a printing press and they are printing the pages of Genesis. Dude, it's fucking awesome. It's great. And then the last thing that we see in this is well, that's why I mean, yeah, Jason, I literally cannot imagine what it would take to recite the entire Bible. And that's one of the cool things. But um that you kn that is a thing and it's possible. I mean, we got monks. There are monks, right? And look, um the Bible is not I'm not comparing, uh I don't know, what can I compare this to? I'm not comparing, Shakespeare to the Bible, even though King James and Shakespeare. King James was what? 1611, and Shakespeare died 1616. It's funny how the two greatest things in the English language, right? The two things that are responsible for modern English, right? The words that we speak and write and use in English come from the King James Bible and from Shakespeare. That's the source of the English language. And an actor can memorize Hamlet, obviously. Um and because they do, but this guy, he's been on the road for I guess what? He's been on the road for 30 years trying to make his way across the wasteland. Is it 30 years or is that Maybe I'm confusing that part with Canticle for Liebowitz, but he's been making his way across, and he is living like, remember in Fahrenheit 451 when they get to the people out there in the wastelands again, each of them is a book. They identify as a book because each of them has memorized a book. Well, that's what happens in this. So he is his name also, like, he's the living Bible for the new world, right? He's the one who carries it. And then they print it off in the printing press. And what's crazy is and that's not even the big reveal. The big reveal, which is ironic, it's ironic to say that. The thing that opens your eyes is that the last shot of the movie is focuses in on his eyes, and we see that he's blind. Isn't that crazy? So so how does that work? Well, he's he knows this, and he knows Braille because of his blindness. And we see that, I mean, he's got big cataracts, right? So he can see the haze and he can see the kind of aura of people, but he can't see the details. And that's because of the that's the irradiated world, and that's the fallout. Um, so in that sense, it's made even the righteous blind, they but what else has it done? Like God provides, it has blinded you to the world, but it has opened your eyes to to God's light, to righteousness, right? And so the reason that he took such a long time to get west is because he's fucking blind and he's wandering the wastelands, and he sticks to the roads because he can see the outline of the road, right? Um, the reason that he always, when he goes outside and he looks up at the sky, is because um, he's trying to see if he's trying to see if he can see. So, and I mean, also, isn't it weird that that ties into something heroic? I mean, sorry, heroic, Homeric, right? Homer was blind, um, and Homer was a bard, an actual bard, right? Now we don't know, like Shakespeare, kind of, we don't know anything about Homer, but uh, I think it's safe to say that he was blind. He was a blind, wild, wandering poet, which is a bard, and we know that the Homeric verse, all of Homer was oracular, right? And one of the reasons that we know that is because of the hexameters, the Homeric hexameters, and because um, that also makes it easier for the poet, or the even the Icelandic saga poet, any of the oral poets, any of the bards, to recite their works, because hexameters help with that, because you know that no matter what, it's all going to go, the verse beats are always going to work. That's your metric. That's like your outline for memorization. That's your template, is the kind of musical score of poetry. And um King James Bible is has a beautiful divine music to it. So 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 that's what happens in the Book of Eli, and I think that this is a great movie because it's hopeful, and it's more hopeful than any of the other ones. Um, and it blatantly says, even that, it's like even the bad guy in this um recognizes its power, right? So yeah, Zatoichi. Zatoichi's good. So anyway, that's the Book of Eli. And so thank you for being here with me, you guys, for this long stream on on a weekend. Let's look at some of the super chats now. Thanks for hanging with me. Let's look at some of the super chats. Let's see what we got. Shouts out to Evan out there, Evan T. homeboy who donated $20 on PayPal. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. That helps me out big time. I can eat. Um, Shouts out to our homegirl, Amptown, who got that $50, and she said, um, I love if you could do an analysis of the movie Bliss with Owen Wilson and Selma Hayek. Okay. Kind of blew my mind. I don't know that movie. That's crazy. How do I not know that movie? I'm the movie guy. Especially with Owen Wilson. We just did Midnight in Paris. We've done Rushmore, which he wrote. I know you say give you a list, but that's the only idea I have. Whenever you can get to it, it would be great. Hope you feel better. Sorry, it's been rough. Thank you so much, Amptown. And I wish I'd read the end of that message first. My bad. Um, thank you so much, Amptown. Really appreciate you. So I will definitely get to that, and I will take a look. If I'll write you back. I'll communicate with you. Thank you so much. That helps a lot. Shouts out to Amptown for that $15 PayPal. Really appreciate you so much. Yo, shouts out to Robert out there. Shouts out to Roberto who sends $5 on Cash App. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Let's see. Shouts out to my homeboy out there, the real John Connor. Real John Connor sent $20 and he said, for Christ is risen. Christ is risen indeed. He says, "Love you, buddy. Thank you, man. I really appreciate you. That means a lot to me. Thank you, real John Connor. You're a good friend." Um, and let's see, another one just came in. Oh, shouts out to our homeboy TH Thomas Henderson, who sent $20 on PayPal. Thank you so much, Thomas Henderson. Love you. You're a great member of this community, the wonderful community, and you can see our homeboy TH over there on in Church of the Eternal Logos streams. Thank you so much, Thomas. Long time friend. Um, shouts out to Amptown who sent $2 and said didn't know you were going to read my email. I'm sorry. Hopefully I didn't give anything away. I mean, that I didn't dox you or anything. We just know you as Amptown, right? So thank you so much, Amptown. I really appreciate you. And I will get to that. I mean, it's okay because you're just saying to do the movie Bliss, and I'd do it eventually because I'd be doing the movie and I'd be giving you a shout out for the sponsor stream. So thank you, really appreciate you. Let's see if we got anything else here on um in super chats. Also, please go to our homeboy ROOXG who did our beautiful intro music. You guys, I mean, that's big. Yo, like the internet's crazy, right? The internet's crazy because like it's crazy how things work. I was watching something earlier and I just happened to see this clip of Tyler the creator, musician, who has a great album Igor. I like his album Igor. I don't like much of his other stuff. I don't really like Odd Future, but I like the album Igor, especially Earthquake. You make my earthquake. You make my earthquake. You all heard that song? That's a great song. That kind of came out like right before Karanka. You make my earthquake. And don't leave. So, but he said, you never know. I mean, we all know this, but he just said, musicians, like, you never know who's watching. He said, he was watching, he was just going through YouTube or whatever, and he found a song, some guy who probably made a song with you know, uh, a TR-707, or whatever, with some bedroom synths, and the song was banging, and it had like 6 views, right? And he was like, I contacted that dude, and he made a beat for me, and he was like, "You never know who's watching." And that's true. I mean, that's crazy because literally, I found our homeboy here, because I looked up. What was I looking up? I was looking up Windows 95. I looked up Windows 95 vaporwave synths. I knew that there would be some sort of, mid 90s esque kind of, vaporwave, mall soft, dead mall music. And then over there in the corner was this song by our homeboy ROXG. And it had, I don't know, 50 views, right? Small channel. And and the song was dope. It was amazing. And he makes jungle drum and bass. And so then, I looked him up on Instagram, and you just reach out, and our homeboy said we can use the music. And so thank you so much. Really appreciate you. And dude, go check out this guy's music. It's amazing. And so thank you. I'll drop the link in a minute. Um, the Plume drops $100 super chat and says, would love to sponsor an analysis stream on American Gods by Neil Gaiman. Whenever you can get to it, much love. Yo, thank you so much, man. That's so awesome. That really helps me. Really appreciate it. Y'all are being so sweet, very generous tonight. So thank you so much. That's awesome. Um, let's see. Oh, no way. This is total synchro. David, that's whoa, that's big time synchro. You just you just said that. He says requesting a BLA album analysis comparison of Pink Floyd, The Wall, and Radiohead. OK Computer. Yo, right before this stream, I was listening to Pink Floyd's The Division Bell. Like I listened to that song High Hopes. I listened to it like 7 times in a row right before this. Um the grass was greener. You know that song? And I don't know why I was listening to it. I think it's because I thought of one of my old friends, and I had this good memory of like in 1996, one of my old friends got the CD version of the Division Bell, and it has the two like Easter Island looking heads facing each other, and it had the CD version had like blinking lights on on the cover of the album, and and I don't know why that occurred to me, but like that's an amazing song. And like, look, I've never, and honestly, like I've never been a big Pink Floyd fan. I think that I mean I like Pink Floyd and I appreciate them. I know why people like Pink Floyd. And David Gilmour seems to be, I mean a lot of the stuff he says is great now. And is along, goes along with what we would wasn't he anti-stabby? So at least I think he was. But like Pink Floyd's like a whole world that is a world that like I've always been aware of people, that's a whole world for people, and I just never really walked through that door um like they did, and but I know why they do that, right? And I do like, how 70s Pink Floyd was like in the studio with Moog synths, and I think that's cool. Um, and it's just different. But like that album, that song, High Hopes, is really good. You should go back and listen to it. It's really cool. Um, and it like one thing about that and about music is that like maybe it's my state of mind. I don't know. In a way I think that like, you know, M m music is God's gift. It's wasn't it Plato who said that music exists and it's there and you're not aware of it. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but you're not aware of it until like you pluck the strings of the lyre, right? And then it's there. It was there. The musical notes are there. They exist. They were made for us, but then you pluck the notes and it's there. And it's amazing how music, like a song like that, which really has nothing to do like with it's it's on the other side of, like, my musical experience or my experience now, but, like, there's something about that song and the tone of the song that, like, really fucking hits me so hard in the chest. Um, and, he said there's some lyrics in that song, beyond a world of he says magnets, beyond a world of magnets and something, but it that made me think of, like, the song is about how life has changed, life changes, and you look back on the past and it's bittersweet, right? And the magnet thing is crazy because it makes me think of the phone, right? The we carry around this, this magnet with us everywhere, and magnet in a literal and a figurative sense. And I think that, um, I don't know, maybe just because it's English, it's such an English song, and it makes me think of England. It makes me think of, um, the 2 years that I spent in England and in Bristol, and, um, it's, so beautiful, it's crazy, man, isn't it crazy how life works? It's crazy how life works. Like, when you're young and you hear the old timers talk about how, like, um, life goes so fast, and you're like, "Oh, whatever," you know? I like talking to old fellas. I like talking to old people because, they old people, they can tell they know how to tell stories, and it's important to listen, listen with discernment, but it's important to listen to the things that respect for my elders, plain and simple, right? And that's one of the things that is so insidious about, um, the way that tech and culture affects people, especially young people, and it's targeted at young people because if I think about old people thinking that young people, like, they don't have any attention span, right? Every generation thinks that about the younger generation, but also now it's so apparent in what they've done to them, in that there's no stamina, there's no attention span, there's no and it's not that it's willful, it's that they don't even know, you know? And specific individuals know, but in a generalized sense. And so, like, you gotta, cherish, people, and, like, I'm 42, but, I feel like I was 23, like, yesterday, man. It was just like it was like yesterday, you know? It feels like yesterday that Pink Floyd album came out. Like, I can remember exactly my friend lending me the CD, and being in my room, and the low light in the window, the sun was going down, and it was a cloudy day, and I was holding that CD in my hand, and I just remember that's the first time I heard it, and that was, like, fucking yesterday, man, you know? And the song is about that. So, that's crazy. So, thank you so much, for, yeah, bringing that up, that I should do a Pink Floyd, some kind of Pink Floyd analysis. Jethro says that if I do Pink Floyd, he will call in. Well, that's reason enough for me to do Pink Floyd right there, because everybody wants to hear our homeboy Jethro on here. And yes, I will do that. I will do that just for you two. We got a lot in the works, but again, like, I gotta get money, to get books, and, like, maybe I should do an analysis from the library. Instead of in the living room here. And I got stacks and stacks of books, but, they're books that um, either I have already read, or I are not, like, appropriate for our stream. Their history. Most of my books are history and poetry. And we're not a history channel. We don't do, books of I mean, I could cover the decline and fall of the British Empire. That'd be a great book to cover, but it's history. It's not literature, and we are the lit channel. And I'll cover that book, like, while we're doing the landscape of literature, because literature covers all these things. But so But we do film. We do film based in literature and music, which is obviously literary. I mean, the music lyric comes from the poetic lyric verse, which comes from the lyre, right? The Greek instrument. So, you know, from the lyric poet. And we talked about how when we were talking about Bob Dylan that time and how ridiculous it was that he won the Nobel Prize for Literature, um, which is, a globalist thing anyway. And all the culture creation involved in Bob Dylan and all that stuff. I mean, and I recognized, his lyrics and Tarantula, that book, that sort of book of prose poems. But he's not a poet, right? People can call him a poet. It's a kind of honorary thing, but he's not like the ancient poet Horace, who is the poet crowned with the laurel, as he says. Um, Marlboro Red Labels, what they used to call mediums, Evan. And one thing that's annoying is when you go to the store and they say shorts are hundreds, and you're like, I know I've said this before, but it's like if I meant hundreds, I would have said hundreds. I'm not fucking smoking hundreds. I'm here for a pack of Misty Virginia Slims. Uh, I'm here for some Misty Virginia Slim 600s. The cigarette's this long, right? No, it's just the old mediums. So, um, Toledo says if Billy ever does a Doors podcast, I will call in. Yes, awesome. That's sweet, Toledo. Our friend Toledo out there, she needs to start a channel too because and we were just talking about The Godfather. And she was, so astute in comparing don't worry, I'm not gonna whatever. But, she was so astute in comparing the language of the script of The Godfather into a Shakespearean sense. And so I said, "When you start your channel, you wanna do a Godfather stream or a Godfather trilogy stream, I'd love to have you on." So we love Toledo, and, yeah, if I did a Doors podcast, I would. I haven't, no, I don't smoke them I don't smoke them hundreds. Hmm. I've always smoked the same brand, always since I was 12. Uh, but yeah, I've avoided doing a Doors podcast, a Doors stream because it's just I don't know. It the door like the even the Doors. Everybody has their sort of breakthrough or gateway into the things that they're interested in. The Doors were a gateway to me into literature in many ways. And it's like, you know, so it's weird. It's kind of the same reason I haven't done like a Rimbaud stream. I mean, Rimbaud is my favorite poet, and I'm not going to do a Rimbaud stream because it's just too. It's I don't know. You got to keep some things to yourself. You know what I'm saying? But Doors. I mean, maybe it would be interesting to cover. Um, no one here gets out alive, and some of the lyrics we could cover. Like, I mean, we could analyze the Crystal Ship. I did talk about the Doors when we did the Sophocles stream on Oedipus Rex. We talked about Lost in a Roman Wilderness of Pain because um, the song "The End" is Sophoclean. It's an Oedipal song, like explicitly Oedipal. So I did compare it to that. So we talked about the Doors in that sense, and of course, Jay just covered the Doors of Perception, the Huxley book. So again, I will be with Jay covering Network, the 1976 film Network, in 2 weeks. I'll be on Church of the Eternal Logos tomorrow night covering Raiders of the Lost Ark. Please check out my um, appearances on appearances. They're not visual, they're radio appearances. I think they are gonna have, cams on in the future. But right, they have it's a radio, TNT Radio Live with our homeboy Hesher. I was on there yesterday, uh, in the second hour, the 20-minute spot. It was great. And then I was on the week before, and I was on with Joseph Arthur late night Saturday night last week for an hour with him and Ruckus. And you can get the links on the community tab on my page, and also if you follow me on Instagram. So check those out. And let's see. I'm gonna drop this link to. I'm gonna drop this link to our homeboy ROXG in a minute. Let me refresh the super chat page. We did a long one tonight, y'all. This was fun. It's fun and edifying, especially for me after the week I've had. So again, thanks to Non de Plume for that $100 big time sponsor stream super chat. Amptown for that $2. Non de Plume for $4.99. Oh, he said, yeah, Pan Am. Yes, thank you. Non de Plume dropped $9.99. Hope this week turns around for you. Sending love, and we'll keep you in prayers. Appreciate you in streams. Thank you so much. That means a lot. Shouts out for that $5 from my homeboy Block Party Vintage. Amptown mentioned the $50. She dropped a $2 super chat earlier. Frankie D dropped $4.99 about Don Quixote. If somebody wants to do a sponsor stream on Don Quixote, please send me that. Benjamin. Shouts out to Elias, who sends $9.99 post-apocalyptic literature. Frankie D last week dropped $20 for Fahrenheit 451. Let me see if I can pull this up. Yes, let me share this with you right now. This is ROXG Lost in Time. Please go to his page. Yo, he's got 87 subscribers, and this dude makes fucking dope music. Really just banging. I like jungle drum and bass because I lived in Bristol for 2 years. Which is the home of that. So here's our homeboy ROXG. Check him out. Check out his channel. Check out his music. Check out his tunes. Oh, Dono chat. Thank you so much. Yes. Shouts out to Chewy. Got to check that Dono chat. Let's look at that. Damn, I need to log back in. Give me a second here. Let's check the Dono chat. Yo, bunch of stuff on here. Oh, let's see. Yo, okay, sweet. Check it. Thanks for that $5 from Well Emmanuel. Try to blame my bad eyes for my ignorance as it's hard to read, but your videos make it obvious that I'm just lazy. Wish I had longer attention span. Great content. Thanks. Yo, thanks to Well Emmanuel. Really appreciate you. Who got it over to us, I think, from the Crucible. Shouts out to Base Homeschool Mama, who did a great stream yesterday on uh he did Roots of World War II. She talked about psychology and roots of World War II. And so check out Base Homeschool Mama, and also Andy, homeboy Andy. Thanks for Well Emmanuel. Appreciate it. Shouts out to Chewy. God bless you, brother. Hope all is well. Love hanging on the weekend live streams. Found you through DPH and JD. Hey, thank you so much. And I'm glad that you got over here. And thank you for staying with us, Chewy, and for that $20 dono chat. Really appreciate you. That means a lot to me. Thank you so much. And we're very grateful to DPH and JD at Jay's Analysis. So thank you so much. Yo, shouts out to Joe for that $100 dono chat. He said, BLA, can you do a review of Breakfast of Champions by Kurt Vonnegut? I hated the book while reading it in college, but would like your analysis on it. Yes, I will definitely do that. I will definitely do Kurt Vonnegut, Breakfast of Champions. Great. That is a great suggestion. I will definitely get into that. And thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Damn, that means a lot to me. Thank you so much. Shouts out to Josh for that $10 dono chat. He says, keep up the great work, Bays Lit. Wow, that really means a lot to me. Thank you so much, y'all. You guys are you guys are so kind tonight. And where do we go? Uh-oh. There we are. So really appreciate y'all. Okay, y'all. I think that's about it. And again, I will be back tomorrow night. Lots going on. Thank y'all. Really appreciate it. And it's been a tough week. Everybody goes through that, but we got to keep on living. LIVIN. So that's all I got. I think I'm gonna leave you tonight. I'm gonna leave you with some music at the end. We never do that. I'm gonna leave you with some music at the end. And remember, like Sam Hyde says, leave a comment. He actually says something else, but he says leave a comment. And I will see y'all later on. I love y'all. And peace. Peace. Let's go.